Konnichiwa no minasama, anata wa genki desu ka? Osuki no Biohazard no shoujo Sabrina desu. Junbei wa ii desu ka? Hey everyone, how's it going? It's your favorite Resident Evil girl, Sabrina here, and today we are going to continue our reading of The Umbrella Conspiracy. Now, last time when we left off, we were reading online. I was not able to find a completed online version of this book. I was only able to get the physical copy, so I will be reading from the physical copy today, and I don't have a way to display what we're reading on screen, unfortunately. I tried many different sites and things looking for a digital copy, and it seems to be wiped from the internet. So I could find it in Spanish, though. You can find it in Spanish everywhere, but you can't find it in English. So yeah, physical copy today. I got it marked where we left off before, so should be pretty fun. She said this week she will voice each character uniquely. Looking forward to it. I will try. I'm going to try. Sometimes when because like, it happened like this with my Super Mario 64 playthrough. I get inconsistent with whose voice is what. So one time I'll be reading someone's voice a certain way, and then when I go to read it again, I'm gonna have to try and remember, and then it ends up being like a slight variation of it. So if that happens, I apologize. I will try my best to keep it consistent though. So let me send out my links and we can get started. I was a little behind schedule today, so that's why I literally just got my monster. I haven't even opened it yet. So thank you for the hearts, by the way. I really appreciate that. I always love seeing that. I think I'm getting faster at doing this. There we go. Yeah, so like I haven't like put a lot of thought into the voices, to be honest. I kind of forgot about that. So like I'm gonna try my best though. I was trying to think about it like right before stream, like after you said that, and like, or sorry, not, you know what I'm trying to say. Umbrella conspiring. I'm all over the place today. Umbrella conspiring about the next letter to use for a virus. Why haven't they gone something cool like the the Y virus or the Z virus? Like, why not like a cool letter? Why is it gotta be like the C virus? Like, C is like such a not cool letter. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. So yeah, with like Barry's voice, I'm gonna try and talk like as if I had like my cheeks full, because I feel like that's like a good like representation of Barry. With like Wesker, I'm gonna try to talk a little more nasally. So like I do have ideas for like the people, but like I haven't put thought into it. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's great. I'm gonna open my monster now though. It's such a like struggle to open it with the nails. Like I gotta like come in at like an angle like this, and then like try to leverage my finger into it. Chief Irons, but yeah, well, we're past all the Chief Irons stuff, so like I won't have to do his voice, thankfully. I don't even remember what his voice sounds like in like the games or anything, so I would just be making that up. Like the only reason I know what Barry's voice sounds like is because I just played Revelations 2 on stream. Like, I'm kind of guessing here. Okay, we'll see. Alright, well. We'll wait just like another minute for some more people to join, and then we can get started. I didn't even have like an outfit for today either. I had to do my laundry. So like I'm just wearing my little pink suit. You're right about Wesker having a nasally voice. Yeah, exactly. Hello, YouTube main. Hello, Tom. Hello, 263. Welcome to stream. Pleasure to see you guys as always. I think that's about enough people. I think we can get started. Alright. Pink for the win. Yeah, I know, it matches. It's like, it only makes sense. Pink hairbrush. All pink computer accessories. It only makes sense. Okay. But we can get started. I don't want to keep you guys waiting too long. Even I get bored of waiting sometimes. Alright, so we have left off on chapter 6. I will read like the last little paragraph from last time, just so you guys like kind of get an idea of where we're at for the next chapter. Sabulations to you. Hello, Dinosaur. How's it going? Welcome to stream. Pleasure to see you as always. Next week we can try and get her to draw illustrations to go with the story. Alright, I can only do so much. I'm so bad at drawing too. They'd be like little stick figures and stuff, but you know what? I could probably do it. It wouldn't be like high quality, but I'd do it. Right. Barry stopped short, searching the elegant empty hall and feeling like the butt of some practical joke that simply wasn't funny. Wesker was gone. Wesker! Barry shouted, his deep voice echoing through the chilly room. Captain Wesker! He jogged toward a row of arches at the back of the hall, calling to Jill over his shoulder as he ran. Don't leave the room! Jill walked to the stairs, feeling almost dizzy. First Chris, now the captain? They hadn't been gone 5 minutes and he said he was going to stay put. Why would he have left? She looked around for signs of a struggle, a spent cartridge, a spot of blood. There was nothing to indicate what might have happened. Barry appeared on the other side of the giant staircase, shaking his head and walking slowly to join her. Jill bit her lower lip, frowning. You think Wesker ran into one of those things? She asked. Barry sighed. I don't think the RPD showed and snuck him out. Though if he did run into trouble, we would have heard the shots. Not necessarily. He could have been ambushed, dragged away. They stood silently for a moment, thinking. Jill was still a bit shaken from the face-to-face with the walking corpse, but thought she'd accept the facts pretty well. The woods bordering Raccoon City had become infested with zombies. After a lifetime of reading trashy novels about serial killers, is a cannibal zombie so hard to swallow? Somehow it wasn't, and neither were the murderous dogs or secretly kept estate. There was no question that it all existed. The question was, why? Did the mansion have anything to do with the murders, or had the zombies simply overrun it like they'd overrun Raccoon Forest? And was that creature the last thing Becky and Pris saw? She rejected that thought almost violently. Thinking about the girls now would be a mistake. So, what do we go looking, or do we wait? Jill said finally. Go looking. Ken made it here. The rest of the Bravos could be somewhere in the house. It'd be easy enough to get lost. Chris. He half smiled, though Jill could see the worry in his eyes. See, the only thing about me voicing these is that I have to see who's actually speaking, but, like, I have to read ahead, see who's speaking, and then go back and read it. So, like... like, draw my life from Wesker's point of view. You get an early like from me just for doing the Barry voice. You're welcome. Thank you so much. The Barry voice. I think I tried really hard. I tell you what, it's cool you were able to get Barry's actual behavior. I've been trying for once to get her to read the game, the in-game files and unique voices. Yeah. So like with this sentence, I don't even know who's actually speaking it right now. I'm just gonna assume it's Barry and read it in Barry's voice. So if it's off, oh well. I apologize. Chris and Wesker got sidetracked, but we'll find them. It'd take more than a couple of walking stiffs to cause any of them any grief. He reached into the pocket of his vest and pulled out something wrapped in a handkerchief, handing it to her. She felt the thin metal objects beneath the light fabric and recognized them instantly. It's a set you gave me to practice with last month, he said.
I'll figure you'll have better luck with them.
Jill nodded, tucking the lockpicks into her hip pouch. Barry had taken interest in her former career, and she'd given him a few pieces of her old set, several picks and torsion bars. They could come in handy. The small bundle settled on top of something hard and smooth. Trent's computer! In all the excitement, she'd totally forgotten about her strange encounter in the locker room. She opened her mouth to tell Barry, then shut it, remembering Trent's cryptic warning.
I wouldn't mention this conversation to anyone.
Screw that. She'd almost risked it anyway with Chris. And where is Chris now? Who's to say that Trent's dire consequences haven't already occurred? Jill realized what she was thinking and had to fight off the urge to laugh at herself. What had happened with Trent probably wasn't even relevant to their predicament, and whether or not she could trust Barry, she knew she didn't trust Trent. Still, she decided not to say anything about it, and at least until she had a chance to see what the computer held.
I think we should split up,
Barry continued.
I know it's dangerous, but we need to cover a lot of ground. We find anybody, we meet back here. Use this room as base.
Rubbing at his beard, he fixed her with a serious gaze.
You up for this, Jill? We could search together.
No, you're right, she said. I can take the West Wing. Unlike cops, stars seldom partnered. They were trained to watch their own backs in dangerous situations. Barry nodded.
Okay, I'll go back and see if I can persuade one of the doors to open. Keep an eye out for the back exit. Conserve ammo, and be careful.
You too. Barry grinned, holding up his python.
I'll be fine.
There was nothing left to say. Jill headed straight for the set of doors on the west wall that Wesker hadn't tried earlier. Behind her, Barry hurried back to the dining room. She heard the door open and close, leaving her alone. Here goes nothing. The painted blue doors opened smoothly, revealing a small, shadowy room as cool and silent as the main hall. All in shades of blue, muted track lighting illuminated framed paintings on dusky walls, and in the center of the room was a large statue of a woman holding an urn on one shoulder. Jill closed the door behind her and let her eyes adjust to the gloom, noting the two doors opposite the one she'd come through. The one on the left was open, though a small chest was pushed in front of it, blocking access. It was unlikely that Wesker had gone that way. She walked to the one on the right and tried the knob. Locked. Sighing, she reached into her pack for the picks and hesitated, feeling the smooth weight of the mini disc reader. Well, let's see what Mr. Trent thinks is so important. She slipped it out and studied it a moment, then tapped at the switch. A screen the size of a baseball card flickered to life, and with a few more taps, small lines of type scrolled across the monitor. She scanned the material, recognized the names and dates from the local newspapers. Trent had apparently compiled every article he could about the murders and disappearances in Raccoon, plus the pieces on the stars. Nothing new here. Jill skipped along, wondering what the point was. After the articles was a list of names. William Birkin, Steve Keller, Michael Thies, John Howe, Martin Craghorn, Henry Sarton, Ellen Smith, and Bill Rabbitson. She frowned. None of the names were familiar, except wasn't Bill Rabbitson Chris's friend, the one who had worked for Umbrella? She couldn't be sure. She'd have to ask Chris. Assuming we find him. This was the waste of time. She needed to start looking for the other stars. She pressed the forwarding key to get to the end of the data, and a picture appeared, tiny lines set into patterns. There were squares and long rectangles crosshatched with smaller marks that connected the empty boxes. Beneath it was a single line, a message as enigmatic as she could have expected from Mr. Trent. Night Keys, Tiger Eyes, Boar Crest, Gate of New Life, East Eagle, West Wolf. Gee, how illuminating. That just clears up everything, doesn't it? The picture was some kind of map, she decided. It looked like a floor plan. The biggest area was at the center, a slightly smaller one extending off to the left. Jill suddenly felt her heart skip a beat. She stared down at the small screen, wondering how Trent had known. It was the mansion's first floor. She tapped the forward button again and saw what could only be the second floor, the shapes corresponding to the first map. There was nothing after the second map, but it was enough. As far as she was concerned, there was no longer any question that the Spencer estate was the source of the terror in Raccoon City, which meant that the answers were here, waiting to be uncovered. The zombie groaned as Chris fired point blank into its gut twice. The shots were muffled by its rancid flesh, and it fell against him, expelling a rush of foul, stinking air across his face. Chris pushed it away, the back of his throat locking, with his hands in the barrel of his weapon were dripping with sticky fluids. The creature collapsed to the floor, its limbs spasming. Chris backed away, wiping the Beretta against his vest as he took deep breaths, trying desperately not to vomit. The zombie out in the hall had been a desiccated mess, shriveled and dry. This one was fresh, if that was the right word. Festering, necrotic, wet. He swallowed hard, the urge to throw up slowly passed. He didn't have a particularly weak stomach, but that smell, God. Keep it together, there could be more of them.
At the hall he'd entered was a dark wood and dim light. For the moment there was no sound except the pulse of the blood in his ears. He looked down at the body, wondering exactly what it was, what it had been. He had felt its hot, fetid breath against his face. It wasn't a reanimated corpse, no matter what it looked like. He decided it didn't matter. For all intents and purposes, it was a zombie. It had tried to bite him, and creatures like it had already chowed down on some of Raccoon's population. He needed to find his way back to the others, and they had to get help. They didn't have firepower to handle the situation alone. He ejected the empty clip from the gummy weapon and quickly reloaded, his chest tightening with stress. 15 rounds left. He had a Bowie knife, but the thought of going up against a zombie with only a knife wasn't all that appealing. There was a plain-looking door to his left. Chris pulled at the knob, but it was locked. He squinted at the key plate and wasn't at all surprised to see the etching of what looked like armor. Sword, armor, there was definite theme developing. He moved down the wide hall, listening for a sound and taking frequent deep breaths through his nose. The goo on his vest and hands made it hard to tell if there were any more of them around. The smell was all over him, but it could be his only chance to avoid another close encounter. The hall turned to the left, and he took the corner fast, sweeping the Beretta across a wide wooden expanse. There was a support pillar partially blocking his view, but he could see the back of a man just past it, the slumped shoulders and stained clothes of one of the creatures. Chris quickly edged to the right, trying to get a clear shot. The zombie was maybe 40 feet away, and he didn't want to waste his last rounds. At the sound of his boots against the hardwood floor, it turned, shuffling slowly. So slowly that Chris had hesitated, watching the way it moved. This one seemed to have been dipped in a thin layer of slime, dull light reflecting off its glistening skin as it stumbled almost blindly towards Chris. It slowly raised its arms, its pale, hairless skull wobbling on its emaciated neck. Silently, it shuffled forward. Chris took a sliding step to his left, and the zombie changed direction, veering toward him eagerly, closing the distance between them at a slow walk. Just like in the movies, dangerous but dumb, and easy to outrun. He had to save ammo in case he got cornered. There were stairs at the end of the hall, and Chris took a deep breath, readying himself. He stepped back, giving himself enough room to maneuver, and heard a gasping moan behind him, a fresh wave of rancid stink assaulting his senses. Oh yeah, he spun, the realization hitting him before he even saw it. The festering zombie was only a few feet away, reaching for him, bits of putrid guts spilling out across its shattered abdomen. He hadn't killed it, hadn't waited long enough to make sure, and his stupidity was about to cost him. Oh, shit. Chris sprinted away down the corridor, dodging both of them and cursing himself. He passed the thick support beam almost to the stairs, and stopped cold seeing what waited at the top. He caught only a glimpse of the ragged creature standing at the head of the stairs and spun away, raising his weapon to face the attackers that shambled toward him hungrily. From the shadows beneath the steps came a heavy, gurgling sigh and the scuffing of wood. Another one! He was trapped, and there was no way he could kill them all. Door! It faced the side of the stairs, the dark wood blending so well with the shadows that he almost hadn't seen it. Chris ran for it, grabbing at the handle, praying that it would open, as around him the creatures closed in. If it was locked, he was dead. And then it cuts to one of my favorite parts. Rebecca Chambers had never been more afraid, not once in her 18 years. For what seemed like an eternity, she'd listened to the soft scrape of rotting flesh brushing against the door and tried desperately to think of a plan, her dread building with each passing minute. There was no lock on the door, and she thought she lost her handgun on the run for the house. The small storage room, though well stocked with chemicals and stacks of papers, had offered nothing to use as defense except a half-empty can of insect repellent. It was the can she gripped now, standing behind the door of the tiny room. If or when the monsters finally figured out how to use a doorknob, she planned on spraying it in the eyes and then making a run for it. Maybe they'll be laughing so hard I'll have a chance to slip past. Bug spray, great weapon. She'd heard what could have been shot. Wait, hold on. I got a question. Do you want me to read their thoughts in their voice as well? Or, like, can I just read the thoughts normally? Because, like, oh no, I feel like... Because, like, I feel like that's too much. I'm only gonna read their voices. Like, when they're talking. Alright. She heard what could have been shots somewhere close by, but they weren't repeated. Her hope that it was one of the team faded as soon as seconds ticked past, but she was starting to give serious consideration to the concept that she was only one left, and when the door burst open, a gasping figure hurled inside. Rebecca didn't hesitate. She leapt forward and pressed the button, releasing a cloud of chemical mist into its face, tensing herself to run past it. Gah! It yelled, and fell back against the door, slamming it shut. It covered its eyes, spluttering. It wasn't a monster. She just maced one of the alphas. Oh no! Rebecca was already reaching into her field medical kit, her immense relief at seeing another of the stars, batting with monumental embarrassment. She fumbled out a clean cloth and a tiny squeeze bottle of water, stepping toward him. Keep your eyes closed. Don't rub at them. The alpha dropped his hands, face red, and she finally recognized him. It was Chris Redfield, only the most attractive guy in Stars, not to mention her superior. She felt herself blush and was suddenly glad that he couldn't see her. Nice going, Rebecca. Way to make a good impression on your first operation. Lose your gun, get lost, blind a teammate. She led him over to the small cot in the corner of the room and sat him down, letting her training take over. Lean your head back. This is going to sting a little. It's just water, okay? She dabbed at the eyes with a damp cloth, relieved that she hadn't sprayed him with anything worse. What was that stuff? He said, blinking rapidly. Tears and water streamed down his face, but there didn't seem to be any damage. Bug repellent? The label's been ripped off, but the active ingredient is probably paramethaphine. It's an irritant, but the effect shouldn't last long. I lost my gun, and when I came in, I thought you were one of those things. Though if they haven't figured out how to use a doorknob by now, they probably won't. She realized she was babbling and shut up. Finishing the crude irrigation and stepping back, Chris wiped at his face and peered up with her bloodshot eyes. Rebecca Chambers, right? She nodded miserably. Yeah, look, I'm really sorry. Don't worry about it. I can't do a Chris voice. Chris's voice is too average. Not a bad weapon, actually. He stood up and looked around the small room, frowning. There wasn't much to see. An open trunk full of papers, a shelf lined with bottles of mostly unlabeled chemicals, a cot, and a desk. Rebecca had been through it all in her search for something to use against the creatures. What about the rest of your team? Oh wait, no, that was a Chris line. What about the rest of your team? He asked. Rebecca shook her head. I don't know. Something went wrong with the helicopter and we had to set down. We were attacked by animals, some kind of dogs, and Enrico told us to run for cover. She shrugged, suddenly feeling like she was about 12 years old. I got turned around in the woods and ended up at the front door of this place. I think it was one of the others broke it down. It was open. Hold on. I apologize for that. She trailed off, looking away from his intense gaze. The rest was probably obvious. She had no weapon, she'd gotten lost, and she ended up here. All in all, a pretty poor showing. Hey, he said softly. There's nothing else you could have done. Enrico said run, and you ran, and you followed orders. Those creatures are out there, and the zombies, they're all over the place. I got lost too, and the rest of the alphas could be anywhere. Trust me, just the fact that you made it this far. Outside, one of the monsters let out a low, plaintive wail, and Chris stopped talking, his expression grim. Rebecca shuddered. So what do we do now? We look for the others and try to find a way out. He sighed, looking down at his weapon. Except you don't have a gun, and I'm almost out of ammo. Rebecca brightened and reached into her hip pack. She pulled out 2 full magazines and handed them over, pleased that she had something to offer him. Oh, and I found this on the desk, she said, and produced a silver key with a sword on it. She didn't know what it unlocked, but thought it might be useful. Chris stared at it thoughtfully and then slipped it into his pocket. He walked to the open trunk and looked down at the stacks of papers. He rifled through them, frowning. Your background's in biochemistry, right? Have you looked through these? Rebecca joined him, shaking her head. Barely. I've been kind of busy watching the door. He handed her one of the papers, and she scanned it quickly. It was a list of neurotransmitters and level indicators. Brain chemistry, she said. But these numbers are all screwed up. The serotonin and norepinephrine are too low. But look here, the dopamine is off the chart. We're talking big-time schizo. She noticed the incredulous look on his face and smiled a little. Being an 18-year-old college grad, she had got a lot of that. The Stars had recruited her right after graduation, promising her a whole team of researchers and a lab of her own to study molecular biology, her real passion, provided, of course, that she went through basic training and got some field experience. No one else had shown much interest in hiring a whiz kid. There was a soft thump at the door and her smile faded. She was getting experience, all right. Chris fished the sword key out of his pocket and looked at her seriously. I passed a door with the sword engraved over the keyhole. I'm gonna go check it out and see if it leads back to the main hall. I want you to stay here and go through those files. Maybe there's something we can use. Her uncertainty must have showed in her face. He smiled gently, his voice low and soothing. Hey, I've got plenty of ammo thanks to you, and I won't be gone long. She nodded, making a conscious effort to relax. She was scared, but letting him see it wasn't going to help matters. He probably was scared too. He walked to the door, still talking. The RPD might be here any time, so if I don't come back right away, just wait here. He raised the weapon, putting his other hand on the knob. Get ready. As soon as I'm out, move the trunk in front of the door. I'll give a yell when I'm back. Rebecca nodded again, and with a final quick smile, Chris opened the door and looked both ways before moving out into the hall. She closed the door and leaned against it, listening. After a long seconds of silence, she heard the rattle of gunfire not far away. 5 or 6 shots, then nothing. After a few moments, she moved the trunk to block part of the door, edging it in front of the hinges so she could push it out of the way easily. She knelt in front of it, trying to clear her thoughts as she started looking through the papers, trying not to feel as young and unsure as she actually felt. Sighing, she pulled out a handful of papers and started to read.
Alright. So that was chapter 6. Let me catch up on chat here. I've been trying for once to get her to read. Oh, I read that one. She's sitting there with a friend saying, watch how long I can make these guys wait. No, it's like, reading the files is like, because like, I don't know the people. Like, at least this I know, like I've heard Barry's voice before. I've heard Wesker's voice before. But like, I don't know what Alma Smith's voice sounds like. And like, I can only do so many, like, there's so many notes too. Like, I can only do so many voices. I'm already struggling to come up with like more guy voices. So it's like, I'm trying my best here. Take a look. It's in the book, The Reading Rainbow. Barry just chatting up the sword key door. Yeah. LeVar Burton is awesome. Michael Dees. Yeah, that was his actual name, like D-E-E-Z. That was his name. Trent is the straight up dungeon master of this story. Yeah, he was. There's a cart on AliExpress of RE1 demake for the NES. I kind of want it. That sounds awesome. You should get it. If you get it, I definitely want to see it. Zombie drip check. Oh, and it wasn't emancipated, because I know what emancipated is. It was like half of the word. It was... It's like... Emist, maybe, or some shit like that? I don't know. It was something like that. Like I can't find the actual word. It'd take too long to do it, but it was like half of the word was missing. So it's like, I don't know what I tried. I'm sorry. But it wasn't emancipated, I promise. Missing shoes, slimy odd jacket. Oh yeah, Becky time. Yeah, I love it. Like, the Becky parts in this are just so top tier. Rebecca is amazing. Quietly nestles on the couch and listens to the enthralling storytelling. Hello, Rebel. How's it going? Welcome to stream. Pleasure to see you as always. I'm glad you're enjoying. Honestly, if I wasn't the one reading it, that's exactly what I'd be doing. And to be fair, that's what I did with like the last one. After I finished reading it, I went back through and just listened to the whole thing while I was like relaxing, and like I enjoyed it quite a bit. So I have to go back to work. 1 hour left. Yep. I think certain lines in their voice is okay, and their thoughts is fine as is. Her worst experience at the Spencer Mansion was fumbling in front of Chris. For real. Enrico really said to take cover from the dogs. Oh my god, I had the stream paused on the wait screen. I'm 22 minutes behind. LOL. Oh, I hate that. Was it like the thing where like you get an ad or something, and then like you get an ad, and then when you come back, it like doesn't play the thing anymore, and then you have to just like hit play yourself. But if you're someone who has it in like another tab and they're just listening, you don't like know to check back for it. You just like think that something's going on. So but yeah, there you go. Hope the voices were alright. I tried. With like Chris's, like I said, I don't know what to do, so I just I'm just trying to do a deeper version of my voice, I guess. It's like the way to do it. Here's the phonetic pronunciation. I don't even, what is the line over the letter, like, change it to? Yes, it was the ad thing. Good. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you guys know what word it was. Emaciated. Emaciated, huh? Okay. Thank you guys. Chris sounds like he's getting the bread field. Yeah, yeah, and it's like I don't want to spoil it, but like when Chris just keeps getting ammo and he just rocks this mansion. I swear to God. I feel bad reading the physical book because like my hands are kind of sweaty and it's like already kind of warping the book. And I need to wear like gloves or something when I touch this. Okay. Try and dry off my hands a little bit or something. Emaciated. Learn a new word today. What does it mean? That's what I want to know. What does that even mean? Is it, oh, I got you. Hold on. Right. To be weak, famished, or extremely thin. Okay. Thank you. We are scared of Charlottes, so please change the mentions of Charlottes to Ladybug. Yeah, I can't say that word too much or else it like I don't like I swear to God, people always tell you that um people always tell you that like, oh, you know, your phone isn't listening to you, but if I say that other word that isn't Charlotte's, if I say that word more than a couple of times, I'll start seeing like pictures of them and stuff in like my social media feeds. I don't know why it does that, and it's the most terrifying thing ever, and it like makes me want to get off the internet for a week. But so like I've already started saying Charlotte's instead when I'm talking about it to like other people just to avoid that. It's emaciated. Oh, okay. Either way, I know what that means now. So, I don't have anywhere I can put the otter where you can still see it. Because, like, if it's on the desk, it's below the camera line. If it's down here in my lap, it's below the camera line. It's like, I have no room to put it on the shelf behind me. Like, put it on my shoulder. Read like this, though. It's gonna fall off my shoulder. There's no way it's staying up here. But you know what? See, now I feel bad. I'm sorry. Skynet is real. Yeah. Alright. Well, I'm gonna... okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna put it on my lap, but... just know it's there, okay? I'll bring it up, like, every once in a while. Just like that. Otter's pretty good at hydration reminders, I think. That's right. It's a good hydration reminder point. Sharing my monster. It's yummy, I know, right? Read it in Otter's voice. What would the voice even be? Like I would do like my would default and I'd be like the Toad voice I did in the Mario playthrough, like the lock was a piece of cake, 3 flat tumblers in a single row. Like, but I'm not. That'd be so like hard to read the whole book like that. He eaves off camera. Exactly. He's just listening to the book with us. No big deal. Okay, you guys ready? Jeez, it is pouring outside too. It's storming real bad. We will see him. Exactly. Exactly, you'll see him. He's there. Chapter 7. The lock was a piece of cake, 3 flat tumblers in a row. Jill could have opened it with a couple of paper clips. According to the map, the door would open into a long hall. Sure enough, she took another long look at the pocket computer screen and then slipped it into her pack, thinking. It looked like there was a back way out, though several halls were past a series of rooms. She could look for Wesker and the others along the way, and maybe secure an escape route at the same time. She stepped into the narrow corridor, the fully loaded Beretta in hand. It was a study in weirdness. The hall wasn't at all that spectacular. The carpet runner and wallpaper done in basic tans and browns, the wide windows showing only darkness outside. The display chests that lined the inner wall, though, there were 3 of them, each topped by a small lamp and each prominently displaying a wide array of bleached human bones on open shelves, interspersed with small items of obscurity. Jill started down the hall, stopping briefly at each bizarre spectacle. Skulls, arm and leg bones, hands and feet. There were at least 3 complete skeletons amidst the pale and pitted bones, or feathers, clay beads, and gnarled strips of leather. Jill picked up one of the leather strips and put it down quickly, wiping her fingers on her pants. She couldn't be sure, but she felt like she had imagined a tan-cured human skin would feel, stiff and kind of greasy. Crash! The window behind her exploded inward, a lithe, snowy form lunging into the hall, growling and snapping. It was one of the mutant killing hounds, its eyes as red as its dripping hide. It charged at her, its teeth as bright and dangerous as the jagged glitter of glass still falling from the shattered frame. Back between 2 of the chests, Jill fired. The angle was wrong, the bullet splintering the wood at her feet as the dog jumped at her, growling deep in its throat. It hit her in the thighs, slamming her painfully against the wall, gnashing to get its jaws at her flesh. The smell of the rotting meat washed over her, and she fired again and again, barely aware that she was moaning in fear and disgust, a sound as guttural and primal as the furious dying shrieks that came from the canine abomination. The 5th bullet fired directly into its barrel chest and knocked it away. With a final, almost puppyish yelp, it crumpled to the floor, blood gushing into the tan carpet. Jill kept her weapon trained on the still form, gulping in air in huge, shuddery breaths. Its limbs twitched suddenly, its massive claws beating a brief tattoo across the wet, red floor before it lay still again. Jill relaxed, recognizing the movement as a death spasm, the body releasing life. She'd have bruises, but the dog was dead. She brushed her bangs out of her eyes and crouched down next to it, taking in the strange exposed muscular structure and huge jaws. It had been too dark and hectic on the run to the house to get a good look at the things that had killed Joseph, but in the bright light of the corridor, her initial impression wasn't changed. It looked like a skinned dog. She stood up and backed away, warily eyeing the row of windows in the hall. Obviously, they offered no protection from the hazards outside. The corridor took a sharp left as she hurried on, past more of the macabre displays that decorated the inner wall. The door at the end of the long hall was unlocked, but it opened into another hall. Not as well lit as the first, and at least not as creepy either. The muted gray-green wallpaper sorted paintings of generic scenery and gentle landscapes, not a bone or fetish in sight. The first door on the right was locked, a carving of armor on the key plate. Jill remembered the list on the computer, something about night keys, but decided not to bother with it for now. According to Trent's map, there was a room on the other side that didn't lead anywhere. Besides, if Wesker had come this way, she didn't imagine he was locking doors behind him. Right, just like it was unlikely that Chris would disappear. Don't assume anything about this place. The next door she tried opened to a small bathroom with an antique feel, complete with a ceiling fan and an old-fashioned 4-footed tub. Oh no.
There was no sign of recent use. She stood a moment in the stale, tiny room, breathing deeply, feeling the aftermath of the adrenaline rush she'd had in the corridor. Growing up, she learned how to enjoy the thrill of danger, of sneaking in and out of strange places with only a handful of her tools of her own and her wits to keep her safe. Since joining the Stars, that youthful excitement had faded away, lost to the realities of backup and handguns, but here it was again, unexpected and not unwelcome. She couldn't lie to herself about the simple joy that often followed facing death and walking away. She felt good. Alive. Let's not have a party just yet, her mind whispered sarcastically, or have you forgotten that stars are being eaten in this hellhole? Jill stepped back into the silent hallway and edged around another corner, wondering if Barry had found Chris and if either of them had run across any of the Bravos. She felt like she had an advantage with the maps, and decided that once she'd checked out all the possible escape routes, she'd go back to the main hall and wait for Barry. With the information on Trent's computer, they could search more quickly and thoroughly. The corridor ended with two doors facing each other. The one on the right was the one she wanted. She tried the handle, rewarded with the soft snick of the bolt retracting. She stepped into the dark hall and saw one of the zombies, a hulking pale shadow standing next to a door, maybe 10 feet away. As she raised her weapon, the creature started towards her, emitting soft hunger sounds from its decaying lips. One of its arms hung limply at its side, and although Jill could see a jagged bone protruding from the shoulder, it still clenched and unclenched its rotting fist eagerly as it reached out with the other arm. The head. Aim for the head. The shots were incredibly loud in the chilly gloom, the first blowing off its left ear, the second and third punching holes into its skull just above its pallid brow. Dark fluid streamed down this peeling face and fell to its knees, its flat, lifeless eyes rolling back into its head. There was shuffling movement in the shadows at the back of the hall to the right, exactly where she meant to go. Jill trained the gun on the darkness and waited for it to move closer, her entire body wired with tension. How many of these things are there? As soon as the zombie cleared the corner, she fired, the Beretta jumping lightly in her sweating hands. The second shot punctured his right eye and immediately collapsed into the dark, polished wood of the floor. The sticky, viscous matter of the blown eyeballs flecked across its skeletal face. Jill waited, but other than the spreading pools of blood around the dead creatures, nothing moved. Breathing through her mouth to avoid the worst of the stench, she hurried back to the hall and turned right, down a short, tight passage that had then ended at a rusting metal door. It creaked open and the fresh air flooded past her, warm and clean after a morgue-like chill of the house. Jill grinned, hearing the drone of cicadas and crickets in the night air. She reached the final leg of her little excursion, and although she wasn't outside yet, the sounds and smells of the forest renewed her sense of accomplishment. We got a secured path now, straight back to this place. We can head north, hit one of the logging roads, and hike down to the barricade. She stepped out onto the covered walkway, a mosaic of green stone surrounded by high concrete walls. There were small intermittent openings for the ceiling of the pathway, accounting for the faint, pine-scented breeze. Ivy trickled down from the arched openings like a reminder of the outside world. She hurried down the dim passage, remembering from the map there was a single room at the end and to the right, probably a storage shed. She turned the corner and stopped at another heavy-looking metal door, her smile fading as she reflexively reached for the handle. The keyhole was plugged. She crouched and poked at the tiny hole, but to no avail. Someone had stopped it up with epoxy. To the left of the door was some kind of diagram set into the concrete made of dull copper. There were 4 hexagonal depressions in the flat metal plate, each fist-sized hole connected to each by a thin line. Jill squinted at the legend etched beneath, wishing that she had a flashlight as she struggled to make out the words. She brushed a thin layer of dust off the indented letters and tried again. When the sun sets in the west and the moon rises in the east, stars will begin to appear in the sky, and wind will blow toward the ground, then the gate of new life will open. She blinked. 4 holes. Trent's list! 4 crests, and something about the gate of new life. It's a combination mechanism for the lock. Place the 4 crests, the door's open. Except that means I have to find them first. Jill pushed the door and felt her hope fizzle out completely. Not even a rattle. No give at all. They were going to have to find another way out unless the crests were to be found, which, in this place, could take years. A lone howl rose in the distance. It was joined by the echoing cries of the dogs near the mansion, the strange yodeling sounds piercing the gentle quiet of the woods. There had to be dozens of them out there, and Jill realized that escaping out the back door probably wasn't such a hot idea. She had limited ammunition for her handgun, and no doubts that there were more ghoulish creatures wandering the halls, shuffling about in hungry, mindless silence as they searched for their next grisly meal. She sighed heavily and started back to the house, already dreading the cold stench of death and trying to prepare herself for the dangers that seemed to lurk at every corner. The stars were trapped. Chris knew he had to make the ammo count, so when he left Rebecca, he took off through the dim corridor at a full run, his boots pounding at the wood floor. There were still only 3 of them, all grouped near the stairs. He dodged past them easily and sprinted down the hall and around the corner. As soon as he got to the door that led to the back to the other hall, he turned and assumed a classic shooter's stance, supporting his gun hand at the wrist, his finger on the trigger. One by one, the zombies reeled around the corner, groaning and stumbling. Chris took careful aim, breathing evenly, keeping his focus. He squeezed the trigger, sending 2 bullets through the gangrenous nose of the first. Without pausing, he sent a third shot into the center of the next zombie's forehead. Fluid and soft matter sprayed on the wall behind them as the bullet slapped into the wood. Even as they crumpled to the floor, he'd found his mark on the third creature. 2 more muted explosions and the zombie's brow caved inward, dropping it like a bag of bones it was. Chris lowered the Beretta, feeling the rush of pride. He was a high-ranked marksman, even had a couple of awards to show for it, but it was still good to see what he could do when given enough time to aim. His quick draw wasn't nearly as strong. That was Barry's forte. He reached for the handle and urged into action by the thought of all that was at stake. He figured the Alphas could take care of themselves. They had as much of a chance as he did, but this was Rebecca's first operation, and she didn't even have a gun. He needed to get her out. He stepped back into the soft light of the hall with the green wallpaper, quickly checking both directions. Straight ahead, the corridor was in heavier shadow. No way to tell if it was clear. To his right, the door with the sword on the key plate and the first zombie he'd shot still sprawled lifelessly across the floor. Chris was gratified to see that it hadn't moved. Apparently, headshots were the best way to kill a zombie, just like in the movies. Chris edged toward the sword door, training his weapon left, then right, then left again. He had enough surprises for one day. He checked the small offshoot across from the door and, seeing that it was clear, quickly inserted the slender key into the lock. It turned smoothly. Chris stepped into the small bedroom, only slightly better lit than the corridor, a single bright lamp on a desk in one corner. It was all clear, unless there was something hiding under the narrow cot, or maybe in the closet across from the desk. He shuddered, closing the door behind him. It was every kid's first set of fears. Had been his, too. Monsters in the closet and the thing that lived under the bed, waiting for the careless child's ankle to come within reach. And you're how old now? Chris shook off the case of the nerves, embarrassed at his imaginative wanderings. He walked slowly around the room, looking for anything that might be helpful. There was no other door, no path back to the main hall, but maybe he could find a better weapon for Rebecca than a can of bug spray. Besides an oak table and bookshelf, there was the small unmade bed and a study desk in the room, nothing more. He quickly rifled through the books, then moved around for the foot of the bed to the desk. There was a slim volume next to the desk lamp, the fabric cover untitled, a journal, and although the desktop was coated in dust, the diary had been moved recently. Intrigued, Chris picked it up and flipped to the last few pages. Maybe there was a clue as to what the hell was going on. He sat on the edge of the cot and started to read. May 9th, 1998. Played poker tonight with Scott and the alias from security. Steve from research. Steve was the big winner, but I think he was cheating. Scumbag. Chris smiled a little at that. He skipped down to the next entry and his smile froze, his heart seeming to pause mid-beat. May 10th, 1998. One of the higher-ups assigned me to take care of a new experiment. It looked like a skinned gorilla. Feeding instructions were to give it live animals. When I threw a pig, this creature seemed to play with it, tearing off the pig's legs and pulling out the guts before it actually started eating. Experiment? Could the writer be talking about the zombies? Chris read on, excited by the find. The diary obviously belonged to someone who worked here. Had to be, meaning that the cover-up was even bigger than he'd expected. May 11th, 1998. Around 5 a.m., Scott woke me up, scared the shit out of me, too. He was wearing a protective garment that looked like a spacesuit. He handed me another one and told me to put it on. He said there had been an accident in the basement lab. I just knew something like this would happen. Those assholes in research never rest, even at night. May 12th, 1998. I've been wearing this damn spacesuit since yesterday. My skin's getting grimy and feels itchy all over. The dang dogs have been looking at me funny, and I decided not to feed them today. Screw them. May 13th, 1998. Went to the infirmary because my back is all swollen and feels itchy. They put a big bandage on it and told me I didn't need to wear the suit anymore. All I want to do is sleep. May 14th, 1998. Found another blister this morning. Ended up dragging my foot all the way to the dog's pen. They were quiet all day, which is weird. Then I realized some of them had escaped. If anybody finds out, I'll have my head handed to me. May 15th, 1998. My first day off in a long time, and I feel like shit. Decided to go visit Nancy anyway, but when I tried to leave the estate, I was stopped by the guards. They said the company's ordered that no one leave the grounds. I can't even make a phone call. All the phones have been ripped out? What kind of bullshit is this? May 16th, 1998. Rumors going around that a researcher who tried to escape the estate last night was shot. My entire body feels hot and itchy, and I'm sweating all the time now. I scratched the swelling on my arm, and a piece of rotten flesh just dropped off. It wasn't until I realized the smell was making me hungry that I got violently sick. The writing had become shaky. Chris turned the page and could barely read the last few lines. The world sprawled haphazardly across the paper. May 19th. Fever gone but itchy. Hungry and eat doggy food. Itchy, itchy Scott came. Ugly face, so killed him. Tasty for itchy tasty. The rest of the pages were blank. Chris stood up and slipped a journal inside his vest, his thoughts racing. Some of the pieces were finally fitting into place. Secret research at a secretly kept estate, an accident in a hidden lab, an escaped virus or infection of some kind that altered the people working here, changing them into ghouls, and some of them got out. The murders and attacks on raccoons started in late May, coinciding with the effects of that accident. The chronology made sense, but exactly what kind of research is being done here and how deeply involved was Umbrella? How involved was Billy? He didn't want to think about that, but even as he tried to clear his mind of the thought, a new one occurred to him. What if it was still contagious? He hurried to the door, suddenly desperate to get back to Rebecca with the news. With her training, maybe she could figure out what had been unleashed in the secret lab on the estate. Chris swallowed heavily. Even now, he and the other stars could be infected. Yay! Now we're on to chapter 8. Wait, are those storm sounds real? Well, I mean, there's ones in the video, but like, there's also ones outside, so. Triangle of Terror, Square of Death, Parabola of Mysteries, Rhombus of Terror. Is that the Mystique in the background? Oh, is that Mystique? No, I think you asked me that before. No, it's a JoJo stand. This is Jolene's stand, Stone Free. That's why they're together. Dog Corridor Peak. Chris flexing his slightly higher crit rate. The Keeper's Diary. Yeah, it makes me so happy that they put Itchy Tasty in the book. It's like, even for like people who read the book but like didn't play the game or something like that, they still get the joy of Itchy Tasty. That's like a key Resident Evil thing. Thank you for the hearts, by the way. I really appreciate that. Yeah, Itchy Tasty is necessary. Yeah, if it's a piece of Resident Evil media, it needs an Itchy Tasty. I don't make the rules, okay? It needs Itchy Tasty. Capcom, if you're listening, RE9 better have an Itchy Tasty. Or I'm gonna be sad. Isn't that right? See, even Otter agrees. It needs an Itchy Tasty. And this is your hydration reminder. I just took a sip of mine. Oh yeah. Very happy. Don't disappoint Otter, Capcom. Well, he ought to agree. Both amazing comments. I have to say. Isn't that right, Otter? Yes, it is. It is so right. Yeah. So yeah, that chapter is like just the Chris parts are so nice too. It's like if I could just have this book written only in Chris and Rebecca's point of view, I think I'd like it more than the Jill parts for sure. But then again, I'm just biased because I'm a Jill hater, so makes sense. Oh. Now you guys probably can't see it, but my book's getting warped in the last couple pages there from my hands. Such a shame. I always try and take care of my books. What about Barry? I don't like Barry's parts in the book because all of his parts are just him pissed off. So it's like not fun. The Wesker parts are awesome though. I love like the Wesker parts are also some of my favorites. Pretty much Barry and Jill's parts are like kind of boring to me. But it's just my opinion. Because like Jill's parts are like she just searches all the rooms, you know, like Chris kills a bunch of stuff. Rebecca solves puzzles. Barry was still in his scumbag era. Yeah. Yeah. Barry's just like, I'm so mad. They're threatening my kids. He's like, that's all his parts are. It's like an RE examine description. The book seems warped. Yeah. Not good. I feel so bad. I don't have like gloves or anything to wear, so it's like, oh well. Alright. The shark gloves! I do have gloves. It'll probably make it worse because they're so hot on my hands, but maybe it'll work. I forgot about the shark gloves. Thank you, Tom. No, you know what? That actually helps. Because the part of my hand that's warping the book is like the palm of my hand. So it's like now that's sitting like perfectly on the shark glove. Thank you. Does the book at least use one of his iconic lines? It does. It does. You'll see. Just you guys will see. There's a lot of like Barry stuff that people like from Barry in here, but it's from Jill's point of view, not Barry's. So and the book does a really good job, honestly, of covering like, can Otter survive the shark gloves? Wait, what do you mean survive? Are you in danger? The human mind can't comprehend life from Barry's point of view. That's why. Otter agrees with you. I'm sorry if these are threatening. But like, look at the little shark. Like, he looks so cute. He looks so cute. You think this is a threat to Otter? No. No. It's just a little sea puppy. I got my Neptunes right here. I can't wait to get to can't wait to get that far in the book either. It's gonna be funny. Alright. I'm gonna take another drink and we'll get back to it. One thing that's funny to me too is that they start every chapter in all caps. So like in here it's all caps, so like after Jill and Barry went their separate ways is like caps. So whenever I read it, it makes me think that like they're screaming the first part, like after Jill and Barry went their separate ways. Wesker stayed crouched on the balcony. Like, you know, like that's what it feels like to me, so. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. Good to see that they won't eat them. No, they're friends. Alright. Chapter 8. After Jill... Oh, this is a Wesker chapter 2. Yes! After Jill and Barry went their separate ways, Wesker stayed crouched on the balcony in the main hall, thinking. He knew that time was of essence, but he wanted to outline a few possible scenarios before he acted. He'd already made mistakes and didn't want to make any more of them. The Raccoon Alphas were a bright group, making his margin of error very slim indeed. He'd received his orders a couple of days ago, but hadn't expected to be in position to carry them out so soon. The Bravo team's copter going down had been a fluke, as had Brad Victor's sudden display of cowardice. Still, he should have been more prepared. Being caught with his pants down like this went against his grain. It was so unprofessional. He sighed, putting his thoughts aside. There'd be time for self-recrimination later. He hadn't expected to end up here, but here he was, and kicking himself for lack of foresight wasn't going to change anything. Besides, there was too much to do. He knew the grounds of the estate fairly well, and the labs like the back of his hand, but he'd only been inside the mansion a few times, and not at all since he'd been officially transferred to Raccoon City. The place was a maze, designed by a genius architect at the bidding of a madman. Spencer was bats, no two ways about it. And he'd had the house built with all kinds of tricky little mechanisms, a lot of that silly spy crap that had been so popular in the late 60s. Spy crap is going to make this job twice as hard as it needs to be. Hidden keys, secret tunnels, it's like I'm trapped in an espionage thriller, complete with mad scientists and a ticking clock. His original plan had been to lead both the Alpha and Bravo teams to the estate and clear the area before he proceeded to the lower labs and wrapped things up. He had the master keys and codes, of course. They had been sent along with his orders, and would open most of the doors on the estate. The problem was there was no key to the door that led to the garden. It was a puzzle lock, and was currently the only way to get to the labs outside of walking through the woods, which ain't gonna happen. The dogs would be on me before I could take 2 steps, and if the 121s got out... Wesker shuddered, remembering the incident with the rookie guard who'd gotten too close to one of the cages a year or so back. The kid had been dead before he could even open his mouth to call for help. Wesker had no intention of going back outside without an army to back him up. The last contact with the estate had been over 6 weeks ago, a hysterical call from Michael Dees to one of the suits in the White Office. The doctor had sealed the mansion, hiding 4 of the pieces of the puzzle lock in a fruitless effort to keep any more of the virus carriers from reaching the house. By then, they were all infected and suffering from a kind of paranoid mania, one of the more charming side effects of the virus. God only knew what tricks and traps the researchers down in the labs had screwed with as they slowly lost their minds. These had been no exception, although he had managed to hold out longer than most of the others, something to do with individual metabolism or so, Wesker had been told. The company had already decided to call a complete wipe, though the babbling scientists had been assured that help was on the way. Wesker had enjoyed a good laugh over that one. There was no way that the white boys would risk further infection. They'd sat on their hands for 2 months while Raccoon suffered the consequences, letting the incompetent RPD investigate while the virus gradually lost its punch. And then send him in to clean up the mess, which by now was considerable. Captain absently ran his fingers across the plush carpet, trying to remember the details of the briefing about Dee's call. Whether he liked it or not, everything had been taken care of tonight. He had to collect the required evidence and get to the labs, and that meant finding the pieces of the puzzle lock. These had been mostly incoherent, ranting about murderous crows and giant charlottes. He had insisted that the crest keys of the puzzle lock were hidden where only Spencer could find them, and that made sense. Everyone who worked in the house knew about Spencer's penchant for cloak and dagger mechanisms. Unfortunately for Wesker, he hadn't bothered learning much about the mansion, since he never thought he'd need the information. He remembered a few more colorful hiding places. The statue of the tiger with the mismatched eyes came to mind, as did the armor display room with the gas and the secret room in the library. But I don't have time to go through all of them, not by myself. Wesker grinned suddenly and stood up, amazed that he hadn't thought of it already. Who said he had to be by himself? He ditched the stars to map out a new plan and search for the crest, but there was no reason he had to do everything. Chris wasn't viable, he was too gung-ho, and Jill was still an unknown quantity. Barry Burton was a family man, and both Jill and Chris trusted him. And while they're all still fumbling around in the house, I can get to the triggering system and then get the hell out. Mission complete. Still grinning, Wesker walked to the door that led to the dining room balcony, surprised to find that he was looking forward to his little adventure. It was a chance to test his skills against the rest of the team and against the accidental test subjects that were surely still lurching around, not to mention old Spencer himself. And if he pulled it off, he was going to be a very rich man. This might actually turn out to be fun. Yay, Wesker chapter! Amazing. Definitely like the shorter of the Wesker chapters, but the Wesker chapters are nice because you get like you get like so much lore dump in each one of his things. Like in that, like, you know, learning about some of the other experiments that are right, like roaming around the mansion and things like that. It's pretty cool, and you get to see like how he hid from them in the beginning. And I think it's funny that like in the game, Barry has you like check upstairs and come back down, even though the book says that's where Wesker was hiding. So like it's funny to see some stuff like that. Yeah. Don't you love the Wesker chapters too? Yeah. Alright. Chapter 9. Wesker has no respect for the oldies. Yeah, that's true. Wesker put a lampshade on his head to hide from Jill, probably. Yeah, he stood in the corner and like he just faced the face the corner like he was in timeout. Like they can't see me. If I can't see them, they can't see me. But I will say that's the only time the Wesker hiding doesn't make sense. The rest of the times, it's like, oh, okay, that's where he was, and like, I would definitely like to do another playthrough of the original game after reading the book, so like, and try and do like a similar path to like how they were solving this. I think that'd be cool. Chapter 9. Come on! Jill whipped her Beretta toward the sound, the mournful shriek echoing all around as the door slipped closed behind her. Then she saw the source of the noise and relaxed, smiling nervously. What the hell are they doing in here? She was still in the back part of the house, and I decided to check out a few of the other rooms before heading back to the main hall. The first door she tried had been locked, a carving of a helmet on the key plate. Her picks had been useless, the lock a type she'd never encountered, so she decided to try her luck on the door across the hall. It had opened easily enough, and she'd gone in ready for anything, though about the last thing she'd expected to see was a flock of crows perched along the support bar for the track lighting that ran the length of the room. Another of the large black birds let out its morose shriek, and Jill shivered at the sound. There were at least a dozen of them, ruffling their shiny feathers and watching her with bright, beady eyes. She quickly surveyed the room for threats. It was clear. The U-shaped chamber she'd entered was as cold as the rest of the house, perhaps colder and empty of furniture. It was a viewing hall, nothing but portraits and paintings lining the inner wall. Black feathers lay scattered across the worn wooden floor amidst the dried mounds of bird droppings, and Jill wondered again how the crows had even gotten inside, and how long they'd been there. There was definitely something strange about their appearance. They seemed much larger than normal crows, and they studied her with an intensity that seemed almost unnatural. Jill shivered again, turning back towards the door. There wasn't anything important in the room, and the birds were giving her the creeps. Time to move on. She glanced at a few of the paintings on her way out, mostly portraits, noticing that there were switches beneath the heavy frames. She'd assumed they were for the track lighting, though she couldn't imagine why anyone had bothered setting up such an elaborate gallery for such mediocre art. A baby, a young man. The paintings weren't awful, but they weren't exactly inspired either. She stopped as she touched the cold metal handle of the door, frowning. There was a small inset control panel at eye level to the right of the door, labeled Spots. She punched one of the buttons and the room dimmed as a single directional light went out. Several of the crows barked their disapproval, fluttering its ebony wings, and Jill turned the light back on, thinking. So if these are light switches, what are the controls beneath the paintings for? Perhaps there was more to this room than she thought. She walked to the first picture across from the door, a large painting of flying angels and clouds shot with sunbeams. The title was From Cradle to Grave. There wasn't a switch below it, and Jill moved to the next. It was a portrait of a middle-aged man, his lined features sagging with exhaustion, standing next to an elaborate fireplace. The cut from his suit and his slick-back hair looked like he had been painted in the late 1940s or early 50s. There was a simple on-off switch underneath, unlabeled. Jill flicked it from left to right and heard an electrical snap, and behind her the crows exploded into screaming motion, rising as one from their brooding perch. All she could hear was the beat of their dark wings and the sudden manic ferocity of their cries as they swarmed towards her. And Jill ran, door seeming a million miles away, her heart pounding. The first of the crows reached her as she grabbed from the handle, its claws finding the soft skin at the back of her neck. There was a sharp stab of pain right behind her right ear, Jill flailed at the rustling feathers and brushed her cheeks, moaning as the furious shrieks enveloped her. She slapped at the air behind her and was rewarded with a startled squawk of surprise. The bird let go of her, reeling away. Too many, too many. Ow, ow, ow! She jerked the door open and fell into the hallway, kicking the door closed even as she hit the floor. She lay there a moment, catching her breath, relishing the cool silence of the corridor in spite of the zombie stench. None of the crows had gotten out. As her heartbeat returned to something approaching normal, she sat up and carefully touched the wound behind her ear. Her fingers came away wet, but it wasn't too bad. The blood was already clotting. She'd been lucky. When she thought of what could have happened and if she'd tripped and fallen, why hadn't they attacked? What had the control switch done? She remembered the snap of electricity when she flipped it, the sound of a spark. The perch! She felt a sudden rush of grudging admiration for whoever had set up the simple trap. When she'd hit the switch, they must have been sent a current through the metal bar they'd been perched on. She'd never heard of attack-trained crows before, but could think of no other explanation, which meant that someone had gone through a lot of trouble to keep whatever was in that room a secret. To get to the answer, she'd have to go back in. I can stand in the doorway, take them out one at a time. She didn't much like the idea, but she didn't trust her aim and would certainly waste a lot of ammunition. Only fools accept the obvious and go no further. Use your brain, Jilly. Jill smiled a little. It was her father talking, reminding her of their training she had before the stars. One of her earliest memories was of hiding in bushes outside of a rickety old house in Massachusetts that her father had rented for them, studying the dark, empty windows that he explained how to properly case a prospect. Dick had made it into a game, teaching her over the next 10 years all the finer points of breaking and entering. Everything from how to remove panes of glass without damaging them, to walking on stairs so they didn't creak. He'd also taught her again and again that every riddle had more than one answer. Killing the birds was too obvious. She closed her eyes, concentrating. Switches and portraits, a little boy, a toddler, a young man, a middle-aged man. From cradle to grave. Cradle to grave. Once a solution occurred to her, she was almost embarrassed by the simplicity of it. She stood up and dusted herself off, wondering how long it would take for the crows to return to their roost. Once they were settled, she shouldn't have any more problems uncovering the secret. She cracked the door open and listened to the whispering beat of wings, promising herself to be more careful this time. Pushing the wrong button in this house could be deadly.
Rebecca, let me in. It's Chris.
There was a sound of something heavy sliding against the wall, and the door of the storage room creaked open. Rebecca stepped away from the entrance as he hurried inside, already pulling the diary out of his vest.
I found this journal in one of the rooms, he said. It looks like there was some kind of research going on here. I don't know, but...
Virology, Rebecca interrupted, and held up a stack of papers, grinning. You were right about there being something useful in here.
Chris took the papers from her and skimmed the first page. As far as he could tell, it was foreign language made out of numbers and letters.
What is all this stuff? DH5AMCR?
You're looking at a strain chart, Rebecca said brightly. That one's a host for generating genomic libraries containing methylated crystalline or adenine residues, depending. Chris cocked an eyebrow at her.
Let's pretend that I have no idea what you're talking about and try again. What did you find?
Rebecca flushed slightly and took the papers back from him.
Sorry, basically, there's a lot of stuff here on viral infection.
Chris nodded. That I understand. A virus. He quickly flipped through the journal, counting the dates from the first report of the accident in the lab.
On May 11th, there was some kind of spill or outbreak in a library on this estate. Within 8 or 9 days, whoever wrote this had turned into one of those creatures out there.
Rebecca's eyes widened.
Does it say when the first symptoms appeared?
Looks like within 24 hours, he or she was complaining of itchy skin, swelling, and blisters within 48 hours.
Rebecca paled.
That's... wow.
Chris nodded.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly. Is there any way to tell if we could be infected?
Not without more information. All of that.
Rebecca motioned at the trunk full of papers.
Is pretty old, 10 years plus, and there's nothing specific about application. Though if an airborne with that kind of speed and toxicity, if it was still viable, all of Raccoon City would probably be infected by now. I can't be positive, but I doubt it's still contagious.
Chris was relieved for himself and the rest of the stars, but the fact that the zombies were all victims of a disease, it was depressing. Whether it was a disaster of their own making or not.
We have to find the others, he said. If one of them should stumble across the lab without knowing what's there.
Rebecca looked stricken at the thought and nodded gamely and moved quickly towards the door.
Chris decided that with a little experience, she'd make a first-rate STARS member. She obviously knew her chemistry, and even without a gun, she was willing to leave the relative safety of the storage room in order to help the rest of the team. Together, they hurried through the dark, wooded hallway, Rebecca sticking close to his side. When they reached the door at the back of the first hallway, Chris checked his Beretta and then turned to Rebecca. "Stay close. The doorway 1 is to the right and at the end of the hall. Probably have to shoot the lock, and I'm pretty sure there's a zombie or two wandering around, so I need you to watch my back." "Yes, sir," she said quietly and then grinned in spite of the situation. Technically, he was her superior. Still, it was weird to have it pointed out. He opened the door and stepped through, training his gun on the shadow straight ahead and then down the hall to the right. Nothing moved. "Go," he whispered, and they jogged down the corridor, quickly stepping over the fallen creature that blocked their path. Rebecca turned to face the open stretch behind them as Chris rattled the doorknob, hoping vainly that it had unlocked itself. No such luck. He backed away from the door and took careful aim. Firing at the locked door wasn't as easy or safe as it looked in the movies. A ricochet off of metal at such close range could kill the shooter. "Chris!" He glanced over his shoulder and saw a shambling figure at the end of the hall, moving slowly toward them. Even in the dim light, Chris could see that one of its arms was missing. The distinctive color of decay wafted towards them as the zombie moaned thickly, stumbling forward. Chris turned back to the door and fired twice. The frame splintered, the inset metal square of the lock revealed in a spray of wood chips. He jerked at the knob and the lock gave, the door swinging open. He turned and grabbed at Rebecca's arm, hustling through the doorway as he pointed the Beretta back down the hall. The creature had made it halfway, but it was stopped at the lifeless body of the zombie that Chris killed earlier. Even as Chris watched in horror and disgust, the one-armed zombie dropped to its knees and plunged its remaining hand into the other's crushed skull. It moaned again, a wet, phlegmy sound, and brought a handful of slushy gray matter to its eager lips. "Oh, man." Chris shuddered involuntarily and hurriedly stepped through the door to join Rebecca, closing a door on the gruesome scene. Rebecca was pale but seemed composed, and again, Chris admired her courage. She was young but tough, tougher than he'd been at 18. He took in the hall at a glance, immediately noticing the changes. To the right, about 20 feet away, was the corpse of one of the creatures, the top of its head blown away. It lay face up, the deep sockets of its eyes filled with blood. To the left were two doors that Chris hadn't tried when he first come to investigate. The one at the very end of the hall was standing open, revealing deep shadows. At least one of the stars came this way, probably looking for me. "Follow me," he said softly, and moved toward the open door, holding the Beretta tightly. He wanted to get back to the main hall with Rebecca, but the fact that one of his team must have gone through the opening deserved a quick look. As they passed the door on the right, Rebecca hesitated. "There's a picture of a sword next to the lock," she whispered. He kept his attention on the darkness just past the open door, but realized as she spoke that there were too many ways for them to get sidetracked. He didn't think the rest of the team was still waiting for him, but his original orders had been to report back to the lobby. He shouldn't be leading any unarmed rookie into unknown territory without at least checking. Chris sighed, lowering his weapon. "Let's get back to the main hall," he said. "We can come back and check it out later." Rebecca nodded, and together they walked back towards the dining room, Chris hoping against the hope that someone would be there to meet them. Barry pointed his Colt towards the crawling ghoul and fired, a heavy round splattering the thing's mushy skull into liquid even as it reached for his boot. Tiny drops of wetness splashed his face as the zombie spasmed and died. Scowling, Barry wiped at his skin at the back of his hand. The tiny white tiles of the kitchen wall got much worse. Rivulets of red coursing down the ground tracks were pooling to the faded brown linoleum. Still, it was pretty disgusting. Barry lowered the revolver, feeling the ache in his left shoulder. The door upstairs had been solidly locked, and he had bruises to prove it. And staring down at the zombie hash in front of him, he realized that he was going to have to back up and break down another one. If he hadn't been certain before, he was now. Chris hadn't come this way. If he had, the crawling creature would have been already history. "So where the hell are you, Chris?" Of the three locked doors, Barry had picked the one at the end of the hall on pure instinct. He'd ended up in a dark, silent hall that led past an empty elevator shaft and down the narrow set of stairs. The bare white kitchen at the bottom had seemed deserted, and the counters thick with dust and corrosion stains on the walls. No sign of recent use, no sign of Chris, and a single door across from the sink had been locked. He'd been about to leave when he noticed the trails of disturbed dust on the floor and followed them. Sighing heavily, Barry stepped over the stinking monster, the final check before he headed back up to door number 2. There were some stacked crates and some old-fashioned There were some stacked crates in the same old-fashioned elevator shaft, also empty. He didn't bother with the call button since the one upstairs hadn't worked. Besides, judging from the rust on the metal grate, no one had used it in quite a while. He turned back the way he came, wondering how Jill was making out. The sooner they could get away, the better. Barry had never disliked the place as much as he did this mansion. It was cold, it was dangerous, and it smelled like a meat locker that had been unplugged for a week. He generally wasn't the type to frighten easily or let his imagination get out of hand, but he half expected to see some white-sheeted spook rattling chains every time he turned around. There was a distant echoing clatter behind him. Barry spun, a knot of dread in his gut as he pointed his weapon randomly at the empty air, his eyes wide and mouth dry. There was another metallic clatter, followed by a low, throbbing hum of machinery. Barry took a deep breath and blew it out slowly, getting a hold of himself. Not a disembodied spirit after all. Someone was using the elevator. Who? Chris and Wesker are missing, and Jill's in the other wing. He stayed where he was, lowering the Colt slightly as he waited. He didn't think the ghouls were smart enough to work the buttons, let alone open the gate. But he didn't want to take any chances. He was a good 20 feet from where the booth would open, assuming it stopped in the basement, and he would have a clear shot at whoever stepped around the corner. A glimmer of hope sparked through his confusion. Maybe it was one of the Bravos, or someone who lived here and could tell them what had happened. With a dull clang, the elevator stopped in the kitchen. There was a squeal of dry metal hinges and footsteps. And Captain Wesker popped into view, his perpetual sunglasses propped on his tan brow. Barry lowered the revolver, grimacing as cool relief swept over him. Wesker stopped in his tracks and grinned back at him. "Barry, just the man I was looking for," he said lightly.
"God, you gave me a scare. I heard the elevator start up and I thought I was going to have a heart attack."
Barry trailed off, his grin faltering.
"Captain," he said slowly, "where did you go? When we came back, you were gone."
Wesker's grin widened. "Sorry about that. I had some business to attend to. You know, call of nature." Barry smiled again, but was surprised by the confession. Trapped in hostile territory and the man gone off to take a leak? Wesker reached up and lowered his shades, breaking their eye contact. Barry had suddenly felt a little nervous. Wesker's grin, if anything, seemed to grow wider. It looked like every tooth was showing. "Barry, I need your help. Have you ever heard of White Umbrella?" Barry shook his head, feeling more uncomfortable by the second. White Umbrella is a sector of Umbrella Inc., a very important division. They specialize in biological research, I guess you could say. The Spencer estate houses their research facilities, and recently an accident occurred. Wesker brushed off the section of the kitchen's center island and casually leaned against it, his tone almost conversational. "The division of Umbrella has few ties to STAR's organization, and not long ago I was asked to assist in the handling of this situation. It's a very delicate situation, mind you. Very hush-hush. White Umbrella doesn't want a whisper of their involvement getting out. Now, I'm supposed to do is get the laboratories on grounds here and put an end to some rather incriminating evidence. Proof that White Umbrella is responsible for the accident that's caused so much trouble in Raccoon as of late. The problem is, I don't have the key to get to those labs. Keys, actually, and that's where you come in. I need for you to help me find those keys." Barry stared at him for a moment, speechless, his mind churning. An accident, a secret lab doing biological research, and murdering dogs and zombies loose in the woods? He raised his revolver and pointed it at Wesker's smiling face, stunned and angry.
"Are you insane? You think I'm going to help you destroy evidence, you crazy son of a bitch?"
Wesker shook his head slowly, acting as if Barry were a child. "Ah, Barry, you don't seem to understand. You don't have a choice in the matter. See, a few of my friends from White Umbrella are currently standing outside of your house, watching your wife and daughters sleep. If you don't help me, your family is going to die." Barry could actually feel the blood drain from his face. He cocked the hammer back on the Colt, feeling a sudden, vicious hatred for Wesker infusing every fiber of his being. "Before you pull the trigger, I should mention that if I don't report back to my friends fairly soon, the orders are to go ahead and do the deed anyway." The words cut through the red haze that had flooded Barry's mind, turning his hands clammy with terror. "Kathy, the babies!"
"You're bluffing,"
he whispered. And Wesker's grin finally disappeared, the expression slipping back into the unreadable mask that he usually wore. "I'm not," he said coldly. "Try me. You can apologize to the headstones later." For a moment, neither of them moved, the silence a palpable thing in the chill air. Then Barry slowly eased the hammer back down and lowered the weapon on his shoulder slumped. He couldn't. He wouldn't risk it. His family was everything. Wesker nodded and reached into one of his pockets, producing a ring of keys. His manner suddenly brisk and businesslike. There are 4 copper plates somewhere in this house. Each one is about the size of a teacup, and has a picture engraved on one side. Sun, moon, stars, and wind. There's a back door on the other side of the mansion where 4 of them belong. He unhooked the key from the ring and set it on the table, sliding it across to Barry. This should open all the doors in the other wing, or at least the important ones. 1st and 2nd floor. Find those pieces for me, and your wife and children will be fine. Barry reached for the key with numbed fingers, feeling weak and more afraid than he'd ever been in his life. Chris and Jill will undoubtedly want to help you search. Oh, wait. Sorry. That starts as Barry saying the sentence, and then Wesker takes over. Chris and Jill will undoubtedly want to help you search. If you see either of them, tell them that the back door you've discovered could be the way out. I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to work with their trusted good old friend Barry. In fact, you should unlock every door you can in order to promote a more thorough job. Wesker smiled again, a friendly half-grin that bellied his words. Of course, you tell them you've seen me. That could complicate matters. If I run into trouble, say get shot in the back, well, let's just keep this to ourselves. The key was etched with a little picture, a chest plate for a suit of armor. Barry slipped it into his pocket. Where will you be? Oh, I'll be around, don't worry. I'll contact you when the time is right. Barry looked at Wesker pleadingly, helpless to keep the wavering fear out of his voice. You'll tell them that I'm helping you, right? You won't forget to report? Wesker turned and walked towards the elevator, calling out his shoulder. Trust me, Barry. Do what I tell you and there's nothing to worry about. There was the rattle of the elevator's gate opening and closing, and Wesker was gone. Barry stood a moment longer, staring into the empty space where Wesker had been, trying to find a way out of the threat. There wasn't one. There was no contest between his honor and his family. He could live without honor. He set his jaw and walked back to the stairs, determined to do what he had to do to save Kathy and the girls. When this was over, when he could be sure they were safe, there won't be any place for you to hide, Captain. Barry clenched his giant fists, knuckles whitening, and promised himself that Wesker would pay for what he was doing, with interest. Ooh, okay, and that's the end. Oh, I don't know how I muted. I didn't even touch the mute button. That was weird. I don't know how much of that. I just read all the comments though. I didn't know if you guys heard all that, but yeah, I don't know. Do I just read the comments again? I don't think you guys heard that then. I don't know when it could have muted though. I didn't even touch it. Unless like taking the shark gloves off, like like a bead of sweat hit the button or something. So I don't know. Whatever. Either way, you guys get the point. Yeah, it was the gloves, I think, yeah. Okay, hold up. I got you, hold on. I'll be right back. This is your reminder. Get some water, use the bathroom, do whatever you gotta do. I'll be right back. Oop, that was not the right button. I'm sorry. There we go. You think Otter did it? It was Otter. What are you doing that for? Not fair. Yeah, so every time I read the Wesker stuff from now on, I'm just like, let's put on the Gojo sunglasses. So like do that, I'll just be like, now what I'm supposed Barry, just the man I was looking for. Just like that. Oh. Gets disorienting swapping glasses though. Looking slick. Yeah, perfect. Just do like another reading of like only the Wesker parts with with like a Wesker cosplay on or something. Now that's something I would do. That'd be cool. So I was thinking about it and I'm like, maybe the leather gloves would work better, but I'm like, I hope they don't make my hands sweat. I wish I just had like rubber gloves or something. Put on the every RE protagonist glove. Yeah, there we go. I'm glad someone else noticed that. Wait, noticed what? That every protagonist has these gloves? Either that or the ones where it's like 2 fingers are like missing. Yeah. That's why when I do my Sabrina Wesker cosplay, I wear these gloves. That's why they're on the desk, actually. Yeah, we're on chapter 10 now. Made it quite far. We're flying through chapters. I wonder if I can put the Wesker glasses over my glasses. I'm just like... Even the live action Netflix show got that right. The only good part of that whole show was the Wesker with like the Olive Garden breadsticks. It was just too good. It's like that scene alone made it worth watching to me. It was awesome. I'm sorry, book. I'm trying everything I can. Just work with me here. You know, I'm thinking about it, I'm like, nah, there's no way. But I'm like, we could probably catch up to where I'm at. It's only that many pages left. We've read more than that already. It's more RE than people think. Yeah, 100%. Like, I'm also the type of person who I will wholeheartedly stand up for that one Netflix Resident Evil movie. I think it was like Welcome to Raccoon City or something like that, where they had like the dude from Victorious as Leon. That was such a good movie. People will hate on it just because like they're like, oh, they changed it up from the games, but like if you just come at it, like if you have the same mindset of it as like RE6, you can thoroughly enjoy it. So it's like, yeah, you can definitely like, and I don't care what anyone says. The Victorious dude as Leon was so top notch. Bro played a better Leon than Leon, in my opinion. But I think people are too nostalgic for the RE4 like witty Leon, so they're like anything else is trash. But I'm telling you, bro did such a good job. It's so worth watching that movie. The only part I hated was Claire, because like they made Claire like a girl boss. I guess like I don't know if that's like them trying to be woke or something, but yeah, and it's like the gaslight gatekeep girl boss aesthetic for Claire was not it. Claire's like so much smarter than that. That's why it triggered me a little bit, because it's like they took away all the stuff that makes Claire badass and just kind of made her cringy. But the Leon was so good. And like then like the whole thing with like the Lisa Trevor with like with Sherry and stuff. It was so good. I'm telling you, it was good. Anyway, how many are there? How many what exactly? RE books? It even had puzzles. Yeah, exactly. It was like it was more Resident Evil than people think. Oh my god, hi. Hello. Hello, Ben. How's it going? Welcome to stream. Pleasure to see you as always. You got us right in the middle of... We just got to chapter 10. We just finished up the part where Wesker confronts Barry and gets him to work with him. So, and I think it's actually interesting because it happens a lot sooner than people think actually happens, like, according to the book anyway. I know it's not, it's like very loosely, like, not canon, but if you, I like combining the two mediums to create, like, my own, like, headcanon. So it's, like, kind of interesting to see, like, according to the book at least, that he got him to help out, like, well before anything really happened in the mansion. So it's like Barry was like a double agent for that long. It's like makes it way more exciting, I think. I didn't watch the movie. Yeah, I know you were talking about the show. I know. For the book, there's 22 chapters. So we're on 10 of 22. There you go. They were doing pretty good, I'd say. And like the last couple chapters are really short. So and it's kind of like just a back to back. But I do know that a lot of these, like some of these chapters coming up are particularly long. So, yeah. Yeah. Oh, dang. We're still a little ways away too from like the really good Becky parts. Dang. What chapter is this? Oh, that's in this. That's a long chapter. Oh my god. Chapter 10 is all of that. That's wild. That's like half of what we have left. It's crazy. Alright. I think we're about ready to get back to it. It's now right. Yeah. Alright. Chapter 10. Jill slid the heavy copper crest with an engraved star into its position on the diagram. Above the other three openings, it settled into place with a light click, flush against the metal plate. One down. She stepped back from the puzzle of locks, smiling triumphantly. The crows had watched her walk through the hall of paintings without moving from their perch, crying out occasionally as she solved the simple puzzle. There had been 6 portraits in all, cradle to grave, from a newborn baby to a rather stern-looking old man. She assumed they were all of Lord Spencer, though she'd never seen a photo. The final painting had been a death scene, a pale man laying in state and surrounded by mourners. When she flipped the switch on that one, the painting had actually fallen off the wall, pushed out by tiny metal pegs at each corner. Behind it had been a small velvet-lined opening that held the copper crest. She left the hall without any more trouble. If the birds had been disappointed, she couldn't say. She took a final deep breath of the pleasant night air before going back into the mansion, pulling Trent's computer from her pack as she went. Stepping carefully over the crumpled corpse in the dim hall, she studied the map, deciding where to try next. Back the way she'd come, it looked like. She went back through the double doors that connected the corridors into the winding, mild gray-green hall with the landscape paintings. According to the map, the single door just across from her led to a small, square-shaped room which opened into a larger one. Tensing, she grabbed the knob and pushed it open, crouching and pointing a Beretta at the same time. The small room was indeed square-shaped and totally empty. Straightening, Jill stepped in the chamber, briefly appraising its simple elegance as she walked towards the door on her right. It had a high, light ceiling, and the walls were creamy marble fleckled with gold. Beautiful and expensive, to say the least. She felt a vague wistfulness for the old days with Dick, all their grand plans and hopes for each score. This is what real money could buy. Jesus Christ. She readied herself, grasping the cold, flowing metal of the latch and pushing the door open. A quick sweep with the Beretta, and she felt herself relax. She was alone. There was a molded fireplace to her right beneath an ornate red gold tapestry. A low, modern couch and an oval coffee table sat atop a burnt orange carpet of oriental design, and against the back wall, a pump-action shotgun was mounted on dual hooks, shining in the light from the antique light fixture overhead. Jill grinned and hurried across the room, unable to believe her luck. Please be loaded, please be loaded, please be loaded. As she stopped in front of it, she recognized the make. Guns weren't her strong suit, but it was the same as the Stars used, a Remington M870, 5 shots. She holstered the Beretta and lifted the shotgun with both hands, still grinning, and the smile dropped as both mounting hooks clicked upward, released from the weight of the gun. At the same time, there was a heavier sound behind the wall, a sound like balanced metal changing position. Jill didn't know what it was, but she didn't like it. She turned around quickly, searching the room for movement. It was as still as when she'd entered. No screaming birds, no sudden alarms or flashing lights. None of the pictures fell off the wall. There was no trap. Relieved, she quickly checked the weapon and found it fully loaded. Someone had taken care of it, the barrel clean, smelling faintly of cleaner and oil. Right now it was about the best smell she could imagine. The solid weight of it in her hands was reassuring. The weight of power. She searched the rest of the room and was disappointed not to find any more shells. Still, the Remington was a find. Star's vest had a back holster for a shotgun or rifle, and although she wasn't hot with an over-the-shoulder draw, she could at least carry it without tying up her hands. There was nothing else of interest in the room. Jill walked to the door, excited to get back to the main hall and share her discoveries with Barry. She checked out every room that she could open on this side of the first floor. If he'd managed the same, they could head upstairs to finish their search for the Bravos and their missing teammates. And then, hopefully, get the hell out of this morgue. She closed the door behind her and strode across the slate-colored tiles of the classy marble room, hopping as she grasped the knob. And Barry had found Chris and Wesker. They sure didn't come this way. The door was locked. Jill frowned, turning the small gold knob back and forth. It rattled a little, but it wouldn't give it all. She peered at the crack where the door met the frame, suddenly a little anxious. There it was, by the handle, the thick sliver of steel that indicated a deadbolt, and a very solid one. The entire area surrounding it was reinforced, but only one keyhole, and that's for the knob. Click, click, click. Dust rained down from above as the sound of gears turning filled the room. A deep rhythmic clatter of metal from somewhere behind the stone walls. What? Startled, Jill looked up and felt her stomach shrivel in on itself, her breath catching in her throat. The high ceiling she admired earlier was moving, the marble at the corners powdering into dust with the heavy grind of stone against stone. It was coming down. In a flash, she was back at the door of the shotgun room. She snatched at the handle, pushing it down, and found it locked as solidly as the first. Holy shit, bad thing, bad thing, bad thing! Panic rising through her system, Jill ran back to the other door, her frightened gaze drawn back to the lowering ceiling. At 2 to 3 inches each second, it hit the floor in less than a minute. Jill raised the shotgun and aimed at the door to the hall, trying not to think about how many shots it would take to blow apart a reinforced steel deadbolt. It was all she had. The picks wouldn't work on that kind of lock. The first round exploded against the door and splinters flew, revealing exactly what she'd feared. The metal plate that supported the bolt extended across half the door. Her mind raced for an answer and came up blank. She didn't have the shells to blow through it, and the Beretta carried hollow points. They flattened on impact. Maybe I can weaken it, break it down. She fired again, targeting at the frame itself. A thunderous shot tore apart wood and chipped marble, but not enough, not even close. The ceiling continued its clattering descent, now less than 10 feet above her head. She was going to be crushed to death. God, don't make me die like this. Jill, is that you? A muffled voice called from the corridor. She felt a sudden desperate hope course through her at the sound. Barry! Help, Barry, break it down now! Jill shouted, her voice high and shaking. Get back! Jill stumbled away as she heard a heavy blow strike the door. The wood shuddered but held. Jill let out a low cry of helpless frustration, her terrified gaze jumping between the door and the ceiling. Another solid shaking hit to the door, 5 feet overhead. Come on, come on. The third pounding blow was joined by a crunch and splinter of wood. The door flew open, Barry framed in the entry, his face red and sweating, his hand reaching for hers. Jill lunged forward and grabbed her wrist, literally jerking her off her feet onto the corridor. They crashed to the floor, and as behind them the door was crushed off its hinges. Wood and metal squealed as the ceiling continued smoothly down, the door snapping in a series of harsh cracks. With a final resonating boom of impact, the ceiling met the floor. It was over. The house again as silent as a tomb. They staggered to their feet, Jill staring at the doorway. The entire frame was filled with the solid block of stone that had been at the ceiling, at least a couple tons of rock. Are you alright? Are you alright? Barry asked. Jill didn't answer for a moment. She looked down at the shotgun she held in her trembling hands, remembering how confident she'd been that there had been no trap, and for the first time she wondered how the hell they were ever going to make it out of this hellish place. They stood in the empty front hall, Chris pacing carpet in front of the stairs, Rebecca standing nervously by the banister. The massive lobby was as cold and ominous as when Chris had first seen it, the mute walls giving away none of their secrets. The stars were gone, and there were no clues as to where or why. From somewhere deep in the mansion, there was a heavy rumbling sound, like a giant door being slammed. They both cocked their heads listening, but it wasn't repeated. Chris couldn't even tell from the direction it had come. Terrific. That's just great. Zombies, mad scientists, and now things that go bump in the night? Priceless. He smiled at Rebecca, hoping that he looked less rattled than he felt. Well, no forwarding message. I guess that moves us to Plan B. What's Plan B? Chris sighed. Hell if I know. We can start by checking out that other room with the sword key. Maybe we can dig up some more information while we wait for the team to reassemble. A map or something. Rebecca nodded, and they headed back through the dining room, Chris leading the way. He didn't like the idea of exposing her to further danger, but he didn't want to leave her alone either, at least not in the main hall. It didn't feel safe. As they passed the ticking grandfather clock, something small and hard cracked beneath Chris's boot. He crouched down and scooped up a dark gray chunk of plaster. There were 2 or 3 other fragments nearby. Did you notice these when we came through before? Rebecca shook her head, and Chris ducked down, looking for more of them. He didn't remember if they'd been there before, either. On the other side of the table was a broken pile of fragments. They hurried around the end of the long hall, past the elaborately decorated fireplace, stopping in front of the shattered pile. Chris nudged at the gray pieces with the tip of his boot. From the angles and shapes, it appeared to have been a statue of some kind. Whatever it was is garbage now. Is it important? Rebecca asked. Chris shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. Worth a look anyway. In a situation like this, you never know what might turn out to be a clue. The echoing tick of the old clock followed them back to the hall door and into the smell of decay that filled the tight corridor. Chris pulled the silver key out of his pocket as they headed right, and stopped quickly, drawing his Beretta and moving closer to Rebecca. The door at the end of the hall was closed. When they left, it had been standing open. There was no sense of being watched, of movement in the hall, but someone must have come through while they'd been in the lobby. The thought was disconcerting, reaffirming Chris's uneasy feeling that secret things were happening all around him. As the dead creature to their left was in the same position as before, its blood-filled eyes staring blindly at the low ceiling, and Chris wondered again who had killed it. He knew he should examine the corpse and the unsecured area beyond it, but he didn't want to go off on his own until he got Rebecca somewhere safe. Come on, he whispered. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't, like, it was Chris saying come on, and I, like, my brain just filled in, like, a RE5 voice line, like, come on! Like, that's all I heard in my head reading. But he was like saying it softly, so like he whispered it actually. So he was like, come on. And they edged the locked door, Chris handing the key to Rebecca so that he could watch through the hall for attackers. With a soft click, the intricately paneled door was unlocked, and Rebecca gently pushed it open. Chris could feel that the room was okay, as he even did a quick check and motion for Rebecca to step inside. It was set up like a piano bar, a baby grand dominating the floor across from a built-in counter, complete with stools bolted along its length. Perhaps it was the soft lighting or the muted colors that gave it such an atmosphere of calm stillness. Whatever it was, Chris decided that it was the nicest room he'd encountered so far. It may be a good place for Rebecca to stay while I try and find the others. Rebecca perched herself on the edge of the dusty black piano bench while Chris did a more thorough search for the room. There were a couple of potted plants, a small table, and a tiny alcove behind the wall where the piano was situated. A couple of wood bookshelves pushed in back. The only entrance was the one they'd come through. It had been an ideal spot for Rebecca to hide. He holstered his weapon and joined her at the piano, trying to choose his words carefully. He didn't want to scare her with the suggestion that she stay behind. She smiled at him hesitantly, looking even younger than she was, her spiky red bangs adding to the impression that she was only a child. A child who got through college in less time than it took you to get your pilot's license. Don't patronize her, she's probably smarter than you are. Chris sighed inwardly and smiled back at her. How would you feel about staying here while I take a look around the house? Her smile faltered a little, but she met his gaze evenly. Makes sense, she said. I don't have a gun, and if you run into trouble, I'd just slow you down. She grinned wider and added, though, if you get your ass kicked by a mathematical theorem, don't come crying to me. Chris laughed, as much as his own faulty assumptions at her joke. She wasn't one to be underestimated. He walked to the door, pausing his hand and touched the knob. I'll be back as soon as I can, he said. Lock the door behind me and don't go wandering off, okay? Rebecca nodded, and he stepped back into the hall, closing the door firmly behind him. He waited until he heard the bolt drawn and drew his Beretta, the last trace of a smile falling away as he stared briskly down the corridor. The closer he got to the rotting creature, the worse the smell. He took shallow sips of air as he reached the body, stepping past it to see the hall continued on before he examined it for bullet holes. And he stopped cold, staring at the second corpse stretched out in the alcove, headless and covered in blood. Chris studied the slack, lifeless creatures of the face that lay a foot away, recognizing them as Kenneth Sullivan, and felt a surge of anger and renewed determination sweep through him at the sight of the dead Bravo. This is wrong. All wrong. Joseph, Ken, probably Billy. How many others have died? How many more have to suffer because of a stupid accident? He finally turned away, striding purposefully toward the door that led him back to the dining room. He'd start from the main hall, checking every possible path that the stars could have taken and killing every creature that got in the way of his search. His teammates weren't going to have died for nothing. Chris would see to it if it was the last thing he ever did. Rebecca locked the door after Chris left, silently wishing him good luck before walking back to the dusty piano and sitting down. She knew that he felt responsible for her, and wondered again how she could have been so stupid dropping her gun. At least if I had a gun, he wouldn't have to worry so much. I may be inexperienced, but I went through basic training just like everybody else. She traced a finger aimlessly across the dusty keys, feeling useless. She should have taken some of the files from the storage room. She didn't know what there was much more to be learned from them, but at least she'd have something to read. She wasn't very good at sitting still, and having nothing to do only made it worse. You could practice, her mind suggested brightly, and Rebecca smiled a little, gazing down at the keys. No thanks. She suffered through 4 long years of lessons as a child before her mother had finally let her quit. She stood up, looking randomly around the silent room for something to keep her occupied. She walked to the bar and leaned over it, but only saw a few shelves of glasses and a stack of napkins, all thinly coated with dust. There were several liquor bottles, most of them empty, and a few unopened bottles of expensive-looking wine on the counter behind the bar. Rebecca dismissed the thought, even as it occurred to her. She wasn't much of a drinker, and now wasn't exactly the best time to tie one on. Sighing, she turned to survey the rest of the room. Besides the piano, there wasn't much to see. There was a single small painting of a woman on the wall to her left, a bland portrait in a dark frame, a slowly dying plant on the floor next to the piano, the leafy kind she always saw in nice restaurants, a table that extended out from the wall and an overturned martini glass on top. Considering what she had to work with, the piano was starting to look pretty interesting. She walked past the baby grin and peered into the small opening to her right. There were 2 empty bookshelves pushed to one side, nothing interesting. Frowning, she stepped closer to the shelves. The smaller one on the outside was empty, but the one behind it... She placed her hands on either side of the end piece and pushed, sliding the outer shelf forward. It wasn't heavy and moved easily, leaving a track in the dust on the wood floor. Rebecca scanned the hidden shelves, feeling disappointed. A dented old bugle, a dusty glass candy dish, a couple of knick-knack vases, and some piano sheet music propped up in a tiny holder. She peered down at the title and felt a sudden rush of warm nostalgia for when she used to play it. It was Moonlight Sonata, one of her favorite pieces. It's Moonlight Sonata. She picked up one of the yellowing sheets, remembering the hours she'd put in trying to learn when she was 10 or 11. In fact, it had been this very piece of music that had made her realize she wasn't cut out to be a pianist. It was a beautiful, delicate tune that she'd pretty much butchered at every time she took the bench. Still holding the composition, she walked back around the corner and gazed at the piano thoughtfully. It wasn't like she had anything better to do. And besides, one of the other team members will hear it and come knocking, trying to track down the source of the terrible noise. Grinning, she dusted off the bench and sat down, propping the sheets up on the music holder. Her fingers around the correct positions almost automatically as she read the opening notes, like she'd never given it up. It was a comforting feeling, more change from the horrors inside the mansion. Slowly and hesitantly, she started to play. As the first melancholy sounds rose to the stillness, Rebecca found herself relaxing, letting the tension and fear slip away. She still wasn't very good, her tempo was as off as ever, but she hit all the right notes, and the strength of the melody more than made up for her lack of finesse. If only the keys weren't so stiff. Something moved behind her. Rebecca jumped up, knocking the bench over as she spun around, searching wildly for the attacker. What she saw was so unexpected that she froze for a few seconds, unable to comprehend what her senses were telling her. The wall is moving. Even as the last notes had lingered in the cool air, a 3-foot panel of bare wall to her right slid upwards into the ceiling, crumbling it to a gentle halt. For a moment, she didn't move, waiting for something terrible to happen, but as the seconds ticked past in silence, nothing else moved. The room was quiet and as non-threatening as before. Hidden sheet music, a strange stiffness to the keys, maybe like they were connected to some kind of a mechanism. The narrow opening revealed a hidden chamber about the size of a walk-in closet, and was softly lit in the rest of the room. Except for the bust and the pedestal in the back, it was empty. She stepped toward the opening and paused, thoughts of death traps and poison darts whirling through her mind. But if she walked in and then triggered some kind of catastrophe? What if the door closed and she was trapped there and Chris didn't come back? What if you were the only member of the Stars who didn't accomplish jack shit on this entire mission? Show some backbone, Rebecca. Rebecca steeled herself against the consequences and stepped inside, looking around cautiously. If there was a threat here, she didn't see it. The plain stucco walls were a color of coffee with cream, offset by a dark wood trim. The light on the small chamber was provided by a window to a tiny greenhouse on her right, a handful of dying plants behind the dirty glass. She moved closer to the pedestal at the back, noting that the stone bust on top was Beethoven. She recognized the stern countenance and heavy brow of the Moonlight Sonata's composer. The pedestal itself boasted a thick gold emblem shaped like a shield or coat of arms, about the size of a dinner plate. Rebecca crouched down next to the simple pillar, gazing at the emblem. It looked solid and thick, with a vaguely rural design and a paler gold set across the top. It looked familiar. She'd seen the same design somewhere else in the house. In the dining room over the fireplace! Yeah, that was it! Only the piece over the mantel was made out of wood. She was sure of it. She noticed it while Chris was looking at the broken statue. Curious, she touched the emblem, tracing the pattern across the front, and then grasped the slightly raised edges with both hands and lifted. The heavy emblem came away easily, almost as if it didn't belong there. And behind her, secret door rumbled down, sealing her inside. Without hesitating, she turned and placed the emblem back in its hollow, and the section of the wall rose again, sliding up smoothly on hidden tracks. Relieved, she stared down at the heavy gold emblem, thinking, someone had rigged this all up in order to keep the metal hidden, so it had to be important. But how is she supposed to remove it? Did the one over the fireplace also reveal a secret passage? Or is the one over the fireplace the same size? She couldn't be positive, but she thought it was, and she knew instinctively that it was the right answer. If she switched the two of them, using the wood emblem to keep the door open and placing the gold one over the mantel... Rebecca headed back into the room, smiling. Chris told her to stay put, but she wouldn't have gone more than a minute or two, and perhaps when he got back, she'd have something to show him, a real contribution towards solving the secrets of the mansion, and proof that she wasn't so useless after all. Yay! Now it's chapter 10. Yeah, there you go. Jill, you fool. Jill sandwich. I could see him doing the animation as well when he said it. Yeah, like, come on. It's too perfect. Your nasty-minded chuckles make me laugh. Listen, I'm not the one who worded it like that, okay? Like that's just a really weird, like, way to describe it, you know, like you could say she was, like, pulled off her feet, or, like, swept off her feet, but jerked off. Like, come on. Like, I feel like that was intentional. The smell is a good detail. Too often in the game, you get surprised by a zombie that your character should have smelled a mile away. Right? That's what I'm saying. According to them, like, you can, like, when you enter a room, you can smell if there's a zombie in, like, there. Like all the way down a corridor around the corner, Chris was smelling zombies. Becky to go. That's right. See, like, she, like, I love her chapters because she's like, oh my god, I'm so useless. I fucked everything up. And then she's just like, oh wait, we're like, the virus probably isn't spreadable. I'm gonna play the piano so people find me. Then she starts solving a puzzle. It's like, she's just so awesome. It's getting intense. Rebecca needs to find a typewriter. Right? That's what I'm saying. Oh, that's great. Jeez, there's only 2 chapters until we're where I'm at. That's wild. There's some crazy stuff that happens in the next 2 chapters as well. And it's only 8. Jeez, we made it pretty far. This is your hydration reminder, everyone. Make sure you take a sip. Yummy, right? Oh, it finally stopped storming outside too. That's crazy. It was storming real bad. Like the whole sky was like gray and everything. And it was like lightning, and now it's just like clear blue skies. That was fast. Good progress. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think we did pretty good as well. Because, like, thinking about it, when I read all this, like, we read that much of the book already. It was like, when I did that in 2 separate sessions. And we have it covered in 1. That's wild. I'm convinced Otter and Rebecca are one and the same. Yeah! Not the Spencer Rain. That's what I'm saying. The Otter is just like the reincarnation of Rebecca. That makes sense. Except it doesn't make sense because this is supposed to be a guy otter. Does Otter know how to properly wield the power of the emerald? Of course. I don't know why, but like I'm just like I'm looking at like the image of like the otter holding the Chaos Emerald, and I can just hear like the Sonic Heroes like theme song playing in the background. Sonic Heroes. When's Otter gonna be in Sonic? Like they need to make a Sonic Heroes 2 with like when like one of the factions is like Team Wesker, and it's like me, Otter, and then like Tyrant Jones or something. I might have to add the otter as one of the characters in our little thing. I'm gonna put Otter on the T-shirt too, with the lineup of all the characters. What do you think? Good idea, right? I think so. What can I say? The fans love you. I feel like Otter being pink implies he always has a super form on naturally. I like that, actually. That explains a lot. Is that why you're pink? I bet you look like a normal otter, and then but since you're in like your super form, you're all pink. I bet Tom's right. Isn't that true? Like Super Knuckles being pink. Otter deserves to enter the Hall of Fame. The Sabrina Wesker Hall of Fame. Yeah, I agree. You need to and add Otter to your title pages. It'd be funny to put Otter in some of the thumbnails. I guess they really like you. Otter's the real sluice master. Not the sluices. Do you know how to casually read Russian? I think so. You look like a type of otter that would know Russian. I saved you, it's okay. Alright. No. Now you're getting caught up in my hair. No. Okay. Otter for Rev 3. You get to play as the otter. He's like run around on all fours. Furries would love that game. Absolutely amazing. Yeah. Alright, I'm gonna try and get through the next 2 chapters, so we're at the same spot on that. And I think that's where I'll stop. Because I am starting to get like a little burnt out on the reading. I'm making more mistakes and stuff, so I might have to call it soon. Of course we like Otter. I don't know how to say what kind of antagonist that is. Alright. Well, I think we're ready to get started again. Get another drink. Another thing too is that my throat's starting to get kind of strained from like talking so much. Barry and Jill stood in the covered walkway by the puzzle lock, breathing the clean night air. Beyond the high walls, the crickets and cicadas hummed their ceaseless song, a soothing reminder that there was still a sane world outside. Jill's brush with disaster had left her lightheaded and somewhat nauseous, and Barry had gently led her back to the door, suggesting that the fresh air would do her good. He hadn't found Chris or Wesker, though. He seemed certain that they were still alive. He brought her up to speed quickly, retracing his meandering path through the house as Jill leaned against the wall, still taking deep breaths of the warm air. And when I heard the shots, I came running. Barry rubbed absently his short beard. He smiled at her somewhat hesitant grin. Lucky for you, another couple of seconds you would have been a Jill sandwich. Jill smiled gratefully, nodding, but noticed that he seemed a little strained, the humor forced. Odd, she wouldn't have figured Barry as the type to tense up in danger. Is it any wonder we're trapped here and we can't find the team? This entire mansion is out to get us, not exactly a laugh riot. I hope I can return the favor if you get in a really tight spot, she said softly. Really, you saved my life. Barry looked away, flushing slightly. Glad I could help, he said gruffly. Just be more careful, this place is dangerous. She nodded again, thinking of how close she'd come to dying. She shivered slightly and then forced the thoughts away. They need to be concentrating on Chris and Wesker. So do you think they're still alive? Yeah, besides the shell casings, there was a whole trail of these ghouls in the other wing. All the clean headshots, gotta be Chris. Though I had to splatter a couple more of them upstairs, so I figure he holed up somewhere along the way. Barry nodded towards the copper diagram set into the wall. So, was this Starcrest here already? Jill frowned, a little surprised at the abrupt change of topic. Chris was one of Barry's closest friends. No, I found it in the other room with a trap.
This place seems to be full of them. In fact, maybe we should look for Wesker and Chris together. No telling what they might have stumbled into, or what else could happen to either of us. Barry shook his head. I don't know. I mean, you're right. We should watch our step. But there are a lot of rooms, and our first priority ought to be securing an escape. If we split up, we could try and find the rest of these crests, and look for Chris at the same time, and Wesker. Though his demeanor didn't change, Jill had the sudden distinct impression that Barry was uncomfortable. He had turned away to study the copper diagram, but it almost seemed as if he was trying to avoid eye contact. Besides, he said, we know what we're up against now. As long as we use a little common sense, we'll be fine. Barry, are you okay? You seem tired. It wasn't the right word, but it was the only one that came to mind. He sighed, finally looking at her. He did seem tired. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his wide shoulders were slumped. No, I'm all right. Just worried about Chris, you know? Jill nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. Since he'd pulled her out of the trap, he'd been acting unusually subdued, even nervous. Paranoid much? This is Barry Burton you're talking about, the backbone of the Raccoon Stars. Not to mention the man who just saved your life. What could he possibly be hiding? Jill knew she was probably being overly suspicious, but all the same, she decided to keep her mouth shut about Trent's computer. After all she'd been through, there wasn't feeling particularly trusting. And it sounded like he already had a pretty good idea of the mansion's layout, so it wasn't like he needed the information. That's it, keep rationalizing. Next thing you'll be suspecting Captain Wesker is planning this whole thing. Jill scoffed inwardly as she pushed herself away from the wall, and she and Barry walked slowly back towards the house. Now that was paranoid. They stopped as they reached the door, Jill taking a few lungfuls of the sweet air, letting it settle her nerves. Barry had taken out his Colt Python and was reloading the empty chambers, his expression grim. I thought I'd go back over to the east wing and see if I can pick up Chris's trail, he said. Why don't you head upstairs and start looking for the other creche? That way we can cover all the rooms, work our way back to the main hall. Jill nodded and Barry opened the door, the rusty hinges squealing in protest. A wave of cold swept past them and Jill sighed, trying to prepare herself to face another maze of frigid, shadowy halls, another series of unopened doors, and the secrets that lay behind them. You're going to do fine, Barry said smoothly, placing a warm hand on her shoulder and gently ushering her back inside. As soon as the door closed behind them, he lifted his hand in a casual salute, smiling. Good luck, he said. Before she could respond, he turned away and hurried, weapon in hand. With another creak of ancient metal, he slipped through the double doors at the end of the hall and was gone. Jill stared after him, alone once again in the chilled, stinking silence of the dim corridor. It wasn't her imagination. Barry was keeping something from her. But was it something she needed to worry about, or was he just trying to protect her? Maybe he found Chris or Wesker dead and didn't want to tell me. It wasn't a pleasant thought, but it would explain his strange, hurried behavior. He obviously wanted them to get out of the house as soon as possible, and he wanted her to stay on the west side. In the way he'd fixated on the puzzle mechanism, seeming more concerned with their exit than Chris or Wesker's whereabouts. She looked down at the two crumpled figures in the hall, at the tacky drying pools of red that surrounded them. Maybe she was trying too hard to find a motive that didn't exist. Maybe, like her, Barry was scared and sick, feeling like death could come at any time. Maybe I should stop thinking about it and do my job. Whether or not we find the others, he's right about needing to get out. We have to get back to the city and let people know what's out there. And Jill straightened her shoulders and walked to the door that led to the stairwell, drawing her weapon. She made it this far, she could make it a little further, and try to unravel the mystery that had taken the lives of so many. Or die trying, her mind whispered softly. Forrest Spare was dead. The laughing southern good old boy with his ratty clothes and easy grin was no more. That Forrest was gone, leaving behind a bloody, lifeless imposter slumped against a wall. Chris stared down at the imposter, the distant sounds of the night lost to a sudden gust of wind that whipped around the eaves, moaning through the railing of the second-story patio. It was a ghostly sound, but Forrest couldn't hear it. Forrest would never hear anything again. Chris crouched down next to the still body, carefully prying Forrest's Beretta from beneath his cool fingers. He told himself he wouldn't look, but as he reached for Forrest's belt pack, he found his gaze fixed on the terrible emptiness where Bravo's eyes had once been. Jesus Christ, what happened? What happened to you, man? Forrest's body was covered with wounds, almost an inch or two across and surrounded by raw, bloody flesh. It was as if he'd been stabbed hundreds of times with a dull knife, each viscous cut ripping away chunks of skin and muscle. Part of his ribcage was cruelly exposed, slivers of white showing beneath tattered redness. His eyeless, streaming stare was the crowning horror,
like the killer hadn't been content to take Forrest's life, wanting his soul instead. There were 3 clips for the Beretta and Forrest pack. Chris shoved the magazines into the pocket and quickly stood up, tearing his gaze from the mutilated body. He looked out over the dark woods, breathing deeply. His thoughts were jumbled and grasping, trying to find an explanation, yet unable to hold on to any coherent facts. Once in the main hall, he decided to check all the doors to see which were unlocked, and when he had seen the bloody handprint in the tiny upstairs hall, he heard the wailing cries of birds. He charged in, ready to deal out some justice. Crows. It sounded like crows. An entire flock. Or a murder, actually. Pack of dogs, kindle of kittens, murder of crows. He blinked, his tired mind focusing on the seemingly random bit of trivia. Frowning, Chris crouched back down next to Forrest's ravaged body, studying the jagged wounds closely. There were dozens of tiny scratches amidst the more serious cuts, scratches set into line patterns. Claws? Talons? Even as the thought occurred to him, he heard a young, restless flutter of wings. He turned slowly, still holding Forrest's Beretta in hand that had suddenly gone cold. A sleek, monstrous bird was perched on the railing not 2 feet away, watching him with bright black eyes. Its smooth feathers gleamed dully against his bloated body, and a ribbon of something red and wet hung from its beak. The bird tilted its head to the side and let out a tremendous shriek, a streamer of Forrest's flesh dropping from the railing. All around, the answering cries of its gathered siblings flooded the night air. There was a furious whisper of oversized wings, and dozens of dark, fluttering shapes swooped out from beneath the eaves, screeching and clawing. Chris ran, the image of Forrest's bloody, terrible eyes burned into his pounding thoughts as he lunged for escape. He stumbled into the tiny hall and slammed the door against the rising screams of the birds, adrenaline pumping through his system in hot, surging beats. He took a deep breath, and then another, and after a moment, his heart slowed down to a more normal pace. The shrieks of the crows gradually grew distant, blown away on softly moaning wind. Jesus, how dumb can I get? Stupid, stupid. He stormed out onto the deck looking for a fight, looking to avenge the deaths of the other stars, and had been shocked in his stupidity by what he'd found. If he hadn't let himself get so freaked out by Forrest's death, he wouldn't have made the connection sooner between the birds and the types of wounds, and perhaps noticed the gathering flesh-eaters that had watched him from the shadows, looking for their next victim. He headed for the door back to the main hall, angry with himself for going into a situation unprepared. He couldn't afford to keep making mistakes, to let his attention wander from what was in front of him. This wasn't some kind of game where he could push a reset button if he missed a trick. People were dying. His friends were dying. And if you don't pull your head out of your ass and start being more careful, you're going to join them. Another torn and lifeless body crumpled in a cold hallway somewhere, another victim to the insanity of this house. Chris silenced the nagging whisper, taking a deep breath as he stepped back into the high gallery of the lobby and closed the door behind him. Beating himself up was no more useful than charging blindly around in a strange and dangerous environment, looking for revenge. He had to concentrate on what was important, the lost alphas and Rebecca. He walked towards the stairs, tucking Forrest's weapon into his waistband. At least Rebecca would be able to defend herself. Chris! Startled, he looked down to see the young STARS member at the base of the wide steps grinning at him. He jogged down the stairs, glad to see her in spite of himself. What happened? Is everything all right? Rebecca held up a silver key as he reached her, still smiling widely. I found something I thought you could use. He took the key, noting that the handle was etched with a tiny shield before slipping it inside his vest. Rebecca was beaming, her eyes flashing with excitement. After you left, I played the piano and the secret door opened up in the wall. There was this gold emblem inside, like a shield, and I switched it with the one in the dining room, and the grandfather clock moved, and that key was behind it. She broke off suddenly, her smile faltering as she studied his face. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have left, but I thought I could catch you before you got too far. It's okay, he said, forcing a smile. I'm just surprised to see you here. Found you something a little better than a can of insect repellent. He handed her the Beretta, pulling out a couple of clips to go with it. Rebecca took the gun, staring down at it thoughtfully. When she looked at him again, her gaze was serious and intense. Who was it? Chris thought about lying, but saw that she wasn't going to buy it, and realized suddenly that it was what it was about her that made him feel so protected, that made him want to shield her from the sad and sickening truth. Claire. That was it. Rebecca reminded him of his little sister, from her tomboy sarcasm and quick wit to the way she wore her hair. Listen, she said carefully, I know you feel responsible for me, and I admit that I'm pretty new at this, but I'm a member of this team, so sheltering me from the facts could get me killed. So who was it? Chris stared at her for a moment and then sighed. She was right. Forrest, I found him outside. He'd been pecked to death by crows. Kenneth's dead too. Sudden anguish passed her eyes, but she nodded firmly, keeping her gaze on his. Okay, so what do we do now? Chris couldn't help but the slightest smiles, trying to remember if he'd ever been so young. He motioned up the stairs, hoping that he wasn't about to make another mistake. I guess we try another door. And then we get Wesker. Wesker didn't catch much of the conversation between Barry and Jill, but after a muffled good luck from Mr. Burton, he heard the door open and close somewhere nearby. A moment later, the hollow thump of boot steps against wood, followed by another closing door. The hall outside was clear, his team off on their mission to find the rest of the Copper Crest. Looks like I picked the right room to wait in. He'd used the helmet key to lock himself into a small study by the back door, the perfect place from which to monitor the team's progress. Not only could he hear them coming and going, but he'd be able to get a head start to the labs. He held the heavy wind crest up to the light of the desk lamp, grinning. It had been too easy, really. He'd happened across the plaster statue on his way back from talking to Barry, and remembered that it had a secret compartment somewhere. Rather than wasting valuable time searching, he'd simply pushed the hideous thing off the dining room balcony. It hadn't been hiding one of the crests, but the sparkle of the blue jewel amidst the rubble had been almost as good. There was a room off to the dining hall that held a statue of a tiger with one red eye and one blue, one of the few mechanisms he'd remembered from an earlier visit. The quick visit to the statue had confirmed his suspicions. Both eyes had been missing, and when he placed the gaudy blue jewel into its proper socket, the tiger had turned to one side and presented him with the crest. Just like that, he was one step closer to completing his mission. When the other 3 pieces are in place, I'll wait until they're off looking for the final piece and then slip right out the door. He considered going to check the diagram, but decided against it. The house was big, but not that big. There was no need to expose himself further and risk of being seen. Besides, they probably hadn't managed to find any of the other crests yet. He'd already had a close call when he got downstairs to retrieve a jewel, almost stepping directly into Chris Redfield's path. Chris had found the rookie, and the two of them were blundering around, probably looking for clues. Besides, this room is comfortable. Maybe I'll take a nap while I wait for the rest of them to catch up. He leaned back in the desk chair, pleased with himself for all he'd accomplished so far. What could have been a disaster was turning out quite nicely, thanks to some quick thinking on his part. He had already found one of the crests. He had Barry and Jill working for him, and he'd had the good fortune to run into Ellen Smith while he'd been in the library. Oops, scratch that. It's Dr. Ellen Smith. Thank you very much. After fetching the wind crest, he'd gone to the library to check the small side room that overlooked the estate's heliport. The entrance concealed a bookcase. A quick search revealed nothing useful, and he'd been about to check the back room where Dr. Smith had He'd been about to check the back room when Dr. Smith had shambled out to greet him. He tried to get a date with her ever since he moved to Raccoon. Drawn in by her long legs and platinum blonde hair, he'd always been partial to blondes, particularly smart ones. Not only had she repeatedly turned him down, she hadn't even tried to be nice about it. When he'd called her Ellen, she'd coolly informed him that she was his superior and a doctor, and be addressed as such. Ice Queen through and through. And if she hadn't been so damn good-looking, he would have never bothered in the first place. But my, how your beauty has faded, Dr. Ellen. Wesker closed his eyes, smiling, reliving the experience. It had been the ratty strings of blonde hair that had given her away as she shuffled out from behind a shelf, moaning and reaching for him. Her legs were still long, but they'd lost a lot of their appeal, not to mention a fair amount of skin. "What a lovely perfume you're wearing, Dr. Smith," he said, then 2 shots to the head, and she'd gone down in a spray of blood and bone. Wesker didn't like to think of himself as a shallow man, but pulling the trigger on that high-riding bitch had been wonderfully, no, deeply gratifying. Like icing on a cake, a little bonus perk for taking matters in hand. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll run into that prick Sawton down in the labs. After a few moments, Wesker stood up and stretched, turning to scan some of the titles on the bookshelf behind him. He was eager to get moving, but it might take the stars a while to find the rest of the puzzle pieces, and there was really nothing he could do to hurry the process. He might as well keep busy. He frowned, struggling to make sense of the technical titles. One of the books was called Phageman's Alpha Completion Vectors. The next one was cDNA Libraries Electrophoresis Conditions. Biochemistry texts and medical journals. Terrific. Maybe he'd get that nap in after all. Just reading the titles was making him sleepy. His gaze fell across a heavy-looking tome sitting by itself on one of the lower shelves, bound in a fine red leather. He picked it up, glad to see the title as he could read printed across the front, even one as stupid as Eagle of East, Wolf of West? Wait, that's the same thing written on the fountain. Wesker stared at the words, feeling his good mood slipping away. It couldn't be. The researchers had gone nuts, but surely they wouldn't have locked down the labs. There was no reason for it. He opened the book almost frantically, praying he was wrong. and let out a low moan of helpless rage at what was tucked into the sham book's glued pages. A brass medallion with an eagle engraved on it lay in the cut-away compartment, part of a key to yet another of Spencer's insane locks. It was like a punchline to a cruel joke. To get out of the house, he had to find the crest. Once out in the courtyard, he'd have to make his way through a winding maze of tunnels that ended in a hidden section of the garden, where there was an old stone fountain that marked the entrance to the underground labs. The fountain was one of Spencer's fanciful creations, a marvel of engineering that could be opened and closed to hide the facility underneath. Provided, of course, that you had the keys, 2 medallions made of brass, an eagle one and a wolf on the other. Finding that eagle meant the gate was closed, and that meant the wolf could be anywhere at all, and his chances of even getting to the lab had just dropped to somewhere near 0. Unable to control his fury, he snatched up the metal and threw the book against the desk, knocking the lamp over with a crash and plunging the room into sudden blackness. There was no longer any point in holding on to the wind crest. His perfect plan was ruined. He'd have to go up his edge and hope that one of the others would inadvertently stumble across the wolf metal for him, secreted away somewhere in a massive, sprawling estate, which means more risk, more searching, and a chance that one of them will reach the labs before I do. Seething, Wesker stood in the dark silence with his fists clenched, trying not to scream. And that's the end of that chapter. Yeah, that's one of my favorite chapters in the book, is like Wesker crashing out because he discovered that the labs are locked. It's like hilarious. It usually means a second protagonist. Rest in peace, Forrest, man. Oh my god, it's Forrest. Oh my god. Becky found the shield key? Yeah, she found 2 keys now, remember? She handed the first one to Chris in the save room. And then she just found this one. So, Rebecca being useless is some BS. Wesker wilding out a little right now. Is this why bro starts leaving ammo in their rooms and stuff? I like that you based your impression on Richard Waugh's Wesker. Yeah, you can tell which one I prefer. Isn't that right? But thank you. I didn't put the glasses on for it, but I promise it's only because I didn't want to get that disoriented. I have like a really, really strong astigmatism, so like when I take off my glasses, it looks like everything like shifts sideways, and it like makes me kind of nauseous. So I try not to like take my glasses on and off as much as possible. I either leave them off or leave them on. So, like, maybe I'll start, like, putting glasses over top like I was earlier or something, but, like, I don't know if I can swap. Just doing it that one time earlier was, like, kind of bad. So, I apologize. But yeah. We got... Like, that whole chapter is really nice. You get that, like, awesome, like, Rebecca and Chris part, and then you get the awesome Wesker part. It's like, yes! That's a good chapter. This next one's honestly, this next one's really crazy, too. And if we finish this next chapter, we'll be where I wanted to stop originally. So I'm like... Yeah, I'll probably keep going. It's only 8:36 anyway. The chapters have been awesome so far. Yeah, right? It's like it's actually starting to pick up. It's cool. There you go. Isn't that right? And this is your hydration reminder, everyone. Get something to drink. Hopefully some water, you know, take care of yourself, hydrate. I like the setup for the first couple of chapters in the STARS office. Yeah, that was really cool too. It was awesome. it's I think that's why I don't like Jill's parts, because Jill's parts are just stuff you play in the game. Whereas like Chris, Rebecca, and Wesker's parts are all stuff that you don't experience in the game. So it's like you get to have all the like, and if you're someone like me who when they get interested in something, they like hyper fixate on it and they need to know everything about it. So just like seeing all these different points of views and all this other stuff happening in the background while the player would be doing their usual stuff is so much more exciting to me. It's like, yeah, Jill solved the from cradle to grave puzzle, like whoop de doo. Yeah, that's like the first thing you do in like every Jill playthrough. So what? Oh, that's just my opinion on it. But yeah, I figured it out, and that's why I wanted to say that. Oh, there was something else I wanted to point out too. I was trying to wait till I got to in between chapters to talk about it. What was it? I feel like it had something to do with Chris. I thought it was interesting that Chris found Forrest though. I thought for sure it was gonna be Jill, because you know she gets the grenade launcher from his body. So, and Jill got the shotgun, so like that makes sense. Chris hasn't gotten anything. Ooh, I wonder if Chris. Oh wait, never mind. I know who fights Plant 42. And I know who fights Black Tiger. What other BOWs are? Oh, Yawn. Oh yeah, the Yawn. Yeah, okay. Yep. Let's just get to the next chapter. Isn't that right? Yeah. That is so right. Otter agrees with me. This next chapter is be if we get through this next chapter, it will be an amazing stopping point. So only that much left. Not bad. Great. Yeah. Chapter 12. Jill heard something like breaking glass and held perfectly still, listening. The acoustics in the mansion were strange, the long corridor's unusual floor plan making it hard to tell where sounds were coming from, or if we even heard them at all. She sighed, taking a last look around at the quiet, book-lined sitting room at the top of the stairs. She'd already checked the other 3 rooms along the gallery railing and found exactly nothing of interest. A sparse bedroom with 2 bunks, an office, and an unfinished den with a locked door and a fireplace inside. The only switches she found were the light switches, though she had gotten excited over a rather sinister-looking black button on the wall of the office, until she pushed it and found that she'd managed to discover the drainage control for an empty fish tank in the corner. She found some ammo for the Remington. She's supposed to be grateful for that. A dozen shells in the metal box underneath one of the bunks in the bedroom. If there had been any hidden crests, she'd missed them. Jill, fumbling as always, not thinking to push the... She's just like, oh, it just drains the fish tank. That's totally normal. That's some Jill stuff right there. Couldn't be me. Jill took out Trent's computer and checked the map, finding her position at the top of the stairs. Just past the sitting room's second door was a wide U-shaped corridor that angled back around to the front hall balcony. The corridor also connected to 2 rooms, one to dead end and the other leading through several more. She put the computer away and drew her Beretta, taking a moment to clear her mind before stepping into the corridor. It wasn't easy. Between trying to figure out what had happened in the house to create monsters and her concerns for and about her team, her thoughts were distinctly messy. Should have looked closer at those papers. The office had been simple. A desk, a bookshelf, but there was a rack of lab coats by the door, and the papers strewn across the desk had mostly been lists of numbers and letters. She knew just enough chemistry to know what she was looking at chemistry, so she didn't bother trying to read them. But since finding those papers, she had begun to think of the zombies as the result of a research accident. The mansion was too well maintained to have come from private money, and the fact that it had been kept a secret for so long suggested a cover-up. She guessed that there was a couple of months' worth of dust on almost everything, which coincided with the first attacks in Raccoon. If the people in the house had been conducting some kind of an experiment and something had gone wrong, something that transformed them into a flesh-eating ghouls, that's a bit far-fetched. But it made more sense than anything else she could come up with, although she'd keep her mind open to other possibilities. As to her concerns about the team, Barry was acting weird and Chris and Wesker were still missing. No new developments there. And there won't be any as long as you don't get going. Right. Jill put her musings on hold and stepped out into the hall. She noticed the smell before she actually saw the zombie further down the corridor, crumpled to the floor. The small wall scones cast an uneven glow over the body, reflecting off the dark red trim and tinting everything in the corridor a smoky crimson. She trained her weapon on the still body and heard a door closing somewhere close by. Barry? He said he was going to be in the mansion's other wing, but maybe he'd found something and had come looking for her. Or maybe she was finally going to meet up with someone else from the team. Smiling at the thought, she hurried down the gloomy hall, eager to see another familiar face. As she neared the corner, a fresh wave of decay washed over her, and the fallen creature at her feet grabbed at her boot, clutching her ankle with surprising strength. Startled, Jill flailed her arms to keep her balance, crying out in disgust as the slobbering zombie inched its rotting face toward her boot. Its peeling skeletal fingers scrabbled weakly at the thick leather, seeking a firmer grip, and Jill instinctively brought her other boot down on the back of its head, the heavy tread sliding across its skull with a sickening wet sound. A wide piece of flaking scalp tore away, revealing glistening bone. The creature kept crawling at her, oblivious to the pain. The second and third kicks hit the back of its neck, and on the fourth she felt as much as heard the dull snap of vertebrae giving out, crushed beneath her heel. The pale hands fluttered with a choking liquid sigh, and the zombie settled onto the musty carpet. Jill stepped over the limp body and ran around the corner, swallowing back bile. She was convinced that the pitiful creatures roaming the halls were victims somehow, just as much as Becky and Pris had been, and releasing them into death was a kindness. But they were also a menace, not to mention morbidly unwholesome. She had to be more cautious. There was a door to her right, heavy wood overlaid with twinning metal designs. There was a picture of armor over the key plate, but like the other doors she'd come across upstairs, it was unlocked. There was no one inside the velvet room, but she hesitated, suddenly reluctant to continue her search for whoever else was wandering the area. 2 walls of the large chamber were lined with full suits of armor, 8 to a side, and there was a small display case at the back, not to mention a large red switch set into the middle of the gray-tiled floor. Another trap, or a puzzle? Intrigued, she walked into the room and headed for the glass-fronted display, the silent, lifeless guards seeming to watch her every move. There were a couple of mysterious grated holes on the floor, one on either side of the red switch, for ventilation perhaps, and she felt her heart speed up a little, suddenly sure that she had found another one of the mansion's traps. A quick inspection of the dusty display case decided it for her. There wasn't any way that she could see to open it. The front glass was a single thick piece, and something on one shadowy niche at the bottom glinted like dull copper. I'm supposed to push that button, thinking that it will open the case, and then what? She had a sudden vivid image of the ventilation hole sealing off and the door locking itself, a death by slow suffocation in an airless tomb. The chamber could fill with water or some kind of poisonous gas. She looked around the room, frowning, wondering if she should try to block the door open, or perhaps there was another switch hidden in one of the empty suits. Every riddle has more than one answer, Jilly. Don't forget it. Jill grinned suddenly. Why push the button at all? She crouched down next to the case and took a firm grip on the barrel of her handgun. With a single firm tap, the glass cracked, thin lines spidering away from the impact. She used the butt of the gun to knock out a thick chunk and reached carefully inside. She withdrew a hexagonal copper crest, engraved with an archaic smiling sun. She smiled back at it, pleased with her solution. Apparently some of the house's tricks could be worked around, provided she ignored a few rules of fair play. All the same, she found herself hurrying back to the door, not wanting to call it a win until she was clear of the solemn chamber. Stepping back into the blood-hued corridor, she stood for a moment, holding the crest as she weighed her options. She could continue to look for whoever had closed that door, or head back to the puzzle lock and place the crest. As much as she wanted to find her team, Barry had been right about needing to get out of the mansion. If any of the other stars were still alive, they'd surely also be looking for an escape. Her thoughtful gaze fell across the fetid, broken creature that she'd killed, lingering on the slowly spreading pool of dark fluid surrounding its scabby head. And she realized suddenly that she desperately wanted to leave this house, to escape its tainted air and the pestilent creatures that stalked its cold and dusty halls. She wanted out, and as soon as it was humanly possible. Her decision made, Jill hurried the way back she'd come, gripping the heavy crest tightly. She'd already uncovered two of the pieces that the stars needed to escape the mansion. She didn't know what they'd be escaping to, but anything had to be better than what they would leave behind. Richard! Rebecca immediately dropped to her knees next to the Bravo, feeling his throat for a pulse with one trembling hand. Chris stared mutely down at the torn body, already knowing that she wouldn't find a heartbeat. The gaping wound on Richard Aiken's right shoulder was drying, no fresh blood seeping through the mutilated tissue. He was dead. He watched Rebecca's slender hand slowly drop away from the Bravo's neck and reach up to close his glazed, unseeing eyes. Her shoulders slumped. Chris felt sick over their discovery. The communications expert had been a positive, sweet guy and only 23 years old. He looked around at the silent room, searching randomly for some clue as to how Richard had died. The room they just entered off with, the second-floor balcony, was undecorated and empty. Except for Richard, there was nothing. Frowning, Chris took a few steps towards the room's second entrance and crouched down, brushing at the dark tile floor. There was a dried crust of blood in the shape of a boot heel between Richard's body and the plain wooden door 10 feet away. He stared at the door thoughtfully, tightening his hold on the Beretta. Whatever killed him is on the other side, maybe waiting for more victims. Chris, take a look at this. Rebecca was still kneeling by Richard, her gaze fixed on the bloody mass of his torn shoulder. Chris joined her, not sure what he was supposed to be looking at. The wound was ragged and messy, and the flesh discolored by trauma. Strange, though, how it didn't seem very deep. See those purple lines radiating from the cuts, and the way the muscle has been punctured here and here? She pointed out 2 dark holes about 6 inches apart, surrounded by skin that had turned infected-looking red. Rebecca sat back on her heels, looking up at him. I think he was poisoned. It looks like a snake bite. Chris stared at her. What snake is that big? She shook her head, standing. Got me. Maybe it was something else. That wound shouldn't have killed him, but it would have taken hours for him to bleed out. I'm pretty sure he was poisoned. Chris regarded her with new respect. She had a good eye for details and was handling herself remarkably well, considering. He searched Richard's body quickly, coming up with another full clip and a shortwave radio. He handed both to Rebecca, tucking Richard's empty Beretta into his waistband. He looked at the door again, then back at Rebecca. Whatever killed him might be back there. Then we'll have to be careful. Without another word, she walked through the door and stood there waiting for him. I've got to stop thinking of her as a kid. She's outlived most of the rest of her team already. She doesn't need me to patronize her or tell her to wait behind. He stepped up to the door and nodded at her. She turned the knob and pushed it open, both of them raising their weapons as they edged into a narrow hallway. Straight ahead were a few wood steps leading to a closed door. To their left, an offshoot of the hall, another door at the end. There was blood smeared on the walls bordering the steps, and Chris was suddenly certain that it was Richard's. His killer was behind that door. He motioned down the offshoot, speaking quietly. You take that room. Run into any trouble, come back here and wait. Check 5 minutes either way. Rebecca nodded and moved down the narrow hall. Chris waited until she'd gone in the room before climbing the steps, his heart already thudding solidly against his ribs. The door was locked, but Chris saw that there was a tiny shield next to the keyhole. Rebecca was turning out to be more useful than he could have possibly imagined. He took out the key she'd given him and unlocked the wide door, checking his Beretta before moving inside. It was a large attic, as plain and unassuming as the rest of the mansion was ornate. Wooden support beams extended from the floor to the sloping ceiling, and other than a few boxes and barrels against the walls, it was empty. Chris walked further in, and his guard up as he scanned for movement. At the other side of the long room was a partial wall, maybe 4 feet by 9, standing several feet from the back of the attic. It reminded him of a horse stall, and it was the only area that wasn't open to view. Chris moved toward it slowly, his boots against the wood floor sending hollow echoes through the cold air. He edged to the wall, training his Beretta over the top as he peered down, heart pounding. No snake, but there was a jagged hole near the floorboards between the 2 walls, a foot high and a couple across, and a strange acrid odor, musky-like the smell of some wild animal. Frowning at the scent, Chris started to back away, and stopped, leaning in closer. There was a rounded piece of metal next to the hole, like a penny the size of a small fist. There was something engraved on it, a crescent shape. Chris walked around the side and into the stall, keeping a wary eye on the hole as he crouched down and picked up the metal piece. It was a 6-sided disc of copper with a moon on it, a nice bit of craftsmanship. Inside the hole, a soft sliding sound. Chris jumped back, targeting the opening as he moved. He backed up quickly until his shoulders brushed against the attic wall and then started to edge away. And a dark cylinder shot out of the opening, lightning fast. It was as big around as a dinner plate, and it hit the wall inches from his right leg, wood crunching from the impact. Oh shit, that's a snake! Chris stumbled away as the giant reptile reared back, pulling more of its long, dusky body out from the wall. Hissing, it rised up, lifting its head as high as Chris's chest and exposing dripping fangs. Chris ran across the room and spun, firing at the massive diamond-shaped head. The snake let out a strange hissing cry as the shot tore through one side of its gaping mouth, punching a hole through the tightly stretched skin. It dropped back to the floor and whipped itself toward him with a single waving push of its muscular body, at least 20 feet long. Chris fired again, and a chunk of scaly flesh erupted from the snake's back, dark blood spewing from the wound. With another roaring hiss, the animal reared up in front of him, its head only inches away from Chris's gun, blood gushing from the hole in its mouth. "Eyes! Get the eyes!" Chris pulled the trigger, and the snake fell across him, knocking him to the floor, its body thrashing wildly. The tail slammed into one of the thick support beams hard enough to crack it as Chris struggled to free his pinned arms, to at least hurt it worse before he died. The cold, heavy body suddenly went limp, sagging bonelessly to the floor. "Chris!" Rebecca rushed into the room and stopped cold, staring at the monstrous reptile. "Whoa." His boot found one of the wooden supports, and with a tremendous shove, Chris managed to wiggle out from beneath the thick body. Rebecca reached down to help him, her eyes wide with awe. They stared down at the wound that had killed the creature, the black liquid hole where its right eye had been obliterated by a 9mm slug. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Chris nodded. A few bruised ribs maybe, but so what? He'd literally been inches from certain death, and all because he'd stopped to... He held up the copper crest, having to pry his clenched fingers from around the thick metal. He'd held onto it throughout the attack without even realizing it, and looking at it now, he had a gut feeling it was important somehow. Maybe because you were almost snake food for picking it up? Rebecca took it from him, tracing a finger over the engraved moon. "You find anything?" he asked. Rebecca shook her head. "Table, a couple of shelves. What's this for anyway?" Chris shrugged, looking back down at the bloody hole where the snake's shining eye had been. He shuddered involuntarily, thinking of what could have happened if he missed that final shot. "Maybe we'll figure it out somewhere along the way," he said quietly. "Come on, let's get out of here." Rebecca handed the crest back to him, and together they hurried out of the cold attic. As he closed the door behind him, Chris suddenly realized that although he'd never cared before, he now absolutely hated snakes. Barry walked heavily up the stairs and in the main hall, a knot of dread in the pit of his stomach tightening with each step. He'd been through every room he could open with the east wing and come up empty-handed. The same horrible images played through his mind over and over as he trudged up the steps. Kathy and Moira and Polly Ann, terrified and suffering at the hands of strangers in their own home. Kathy knew the combination to the gun safe in the basement, but the chances were making it down the stairs before someone could get in. Barry reached the first landing and took a deep, shaky breath. Kathy wouldn't even think to run for the weapons if she heard someone breaking through one of the windows or doors. Her first priority would be to get the girls, make sure they were okay. If I don't turn up those crests soon, nothing will be okay. He hadn't seen a phone or radio anywhere in the house. If Wesker couldn't get to that laboratory, how would he be able to contact the people at White Umbrella and call off the killers? Barry reached the door on the upper landing that led to the west wing. His only hope was that either Jill or Wesker had managed to find the 3 missing pieces. He didn't know where Wesker was, although he had doubts that the rat bastard would turn up soon enough. But Jill would probably still be searching upstairs. They could split up the rooms she hadn't checked and at least rule out the least likely areas. If they couldn't uncover more of the crest, he'd have to start going back through the east wing and ripping apart furniture. He opened the door that led to the red hallway, lost in thought, and nearly ran into Chris Redfield and Rebecca Chambers as they stepped out of the doorway on his right. Chris's face lit up with a broad, beaming grin. "Barry!" The younger man stepped forward and embraced him roughly, then backed up, still grinning. "Jesus, it's good to see you. I was starting to think that me and Rebecca were the last ones alive. Where are Jill and Wesker?" Barry pasted a smile on as he fumbled for an acceptable answer, feeling almost sick with guilt. Lying to Jill hadn't been easy, but he'd known Chris for years. Kathy and the girl is dead. Think about it. "Jill and I came after you, but the doors in that hall were locked, and when we got back to the lobby, the captain was gone. Since then, we've been looking for you two and trying to find a way out." Barry smiled more naturally. "It's good to see you two, both of you." At least that much is true. "So Wesker just disappeared?" Chris asked. Barry nodded, uncomfortable. "Yeah, we found Ken. One of the ghouls got him." Chris sighed. "I saw. Forrest and Richard are dead too." Barry felt a wave of sadness and swallowed thickly, suddenly hating Wesker even more. The people Wesker worked for had done this, and now they wanted to cover it all up, avoiding responsibility for their actions. And like it or not, I'm going to help them do it. Barry took a deep breath and fixed an image of his wife and daughters in his mind's eye.
Jill found a back door, and I think we could be a way out. Except it's got this trick lock, like a puzzle. We have to get all the pieces together and open it. There gotta be these 4 metal crests made of copper. Jill got one already, and I think the rest are hidden throughout the mansion.
He trailed off at Chris's sudden grin as Chris reached into his vest. Something like this? Barry stared at the crest that Chris had produced, feeling his heart speed up.
Yeah, that's one of them. Where'd you find it?
Rebecca spoke up, smiling shyly. He had to fight a big snake for it. A really big snake. I think it may have been affected by the accident through a cross-genus virus. Those are pretty rare. Barry reached for the crest as casually as he could manage, frowning.
Accident?
Chris nodded.
We found some information that suggests there's some kind of secret research facility here on the estate, and that something they were working on got loose. A virus.
One that can apparently infect mammals and reptiles, Rebecca added. Not just different species, different families. It certainly infected mine, Barry thought bleakly. He let his frown deepen, feigning thoughtfulness as he struggled to come up with an excuse to get away. The captain wouldn't approach him unless he was alone, and he was desperate to get that copper piece into place and to prove that he was still on board, cooperating, and that he'd convince the rest of the team to help him look. He could feel the seconds ticking away, the metal growing warm beneath his sweating fingers.
We need to get the feds in on this, he said finally. A full investigation, military support, quarantine of the area.
Chris and Rebecca were both nodding, and again, Barry felt nearly overwhelmed by guilt. God, if only they weren't so trusting.
But to do that, we have to find all those crests. Jill might have turned up another one, maybe both of them.
I can only pray. Do you know where she is? Chris asked. Barry nodded, thinking fast.
I'm pretty sure, but this place is kind of a maze. Why don't you wait in the main hall while I go get her? That way we can organize our search and do a more thorough job.
He smiled, hoping it would look more convincing than it felt.
Though if we don't turn up soon, keep looking for those pieces. The back door is at the end of the west wing corridor's first floor.
Chris stared at him for a moment, and Barry could see the questions forming in his bright gaze, questions that Barry wouldn't be able to answer. Why split up at all? What about finding the missing captain? How could it be certain that the back door was an escape? Please, please, just do what I say.
Okay,
Chris said reluctantly.
We'll wait, but if she's not where you think she is, come back and get us. We stand a better chance of making it through this place if we stick together.
Barry nodded, and before Chris could say anything more, he turned and jogged away down the dim hall. He'd seen the hesitation in Chris's eyes, heard the uncertainty in his voice. But with his final words, Barry had felt himself wanting desperately to warn his friend of Wesker's betrayal, leaving the only way to keep himself from saying something he might regret, something that he might get his family killed. As soon as he heard the door back to the balcony close, he picked up speed, taking the corners at full run. There was a dead zombie near the door that led to the stairs, and Barry leaped over it, the stretch falling away as he ducked through the connecting passage. He took the back stairs 3 at a time, and his conscience yammered mercilessly to him, reminding him of his treachery. You're a liar, Barry. Using your friends the way Wesker's using you, playing on their trust. You could have told them what was really going on, let them help you put a stop to it. Barry shook the thoughts away as he reached the door to the uncovered walk, slamming the heavy metal aside. He couldn't risk it. Wouldn't. What if Wesker had been nearby and overheard? The captain had Barry's family to blackmail him with, but once Chris and the others knew the truth, what was to stop Wesker from just killing them? If he helped Wesker destroy the evidence, Stars wouldn't be able to prove anything. The captain would just let them walk away. Barry reached the diagram next to the back door and stopped, staring. The relief flooded through him, cool and sweet. 3 of the 4 openings were filled, the sun, wind, and star crest in place. It was over. He can get to the lab now, call off his people. He doesn't need us anymore. I can go back in and keep the team busy while he does whatever he has to do. The RPD will show eventually, and we'll forget this ever happened. He was so elated that he didn't register the muted footsteps on the stone path behind him, and he didn't realize that he wasn't alone anymore until Wesker's smooth voice spoke up beside him. Why don't you finish the puzzle, Mr. Burton? Barry jumped, startled. He glared at Wesker, loathing the smug, bland face behind the sunglasses. Wesker smiled, nodding his head at the copper crest in Barry's hand.
Yeah, I'm right.
Barry muttered darkly and slipped the final piece into place. There was a thick metallic sound from inside the door. Ka-ching! And Wesker walked past him, pushing the door open to reveal a small, well-used tool shed. Barry peered inside and saw the exit at the opposite wall. There was no diagram set next to it, no more crazy puzzle to figure out. Kathy and the girls were safe. With a low bow, Wesker motioned for Barry to step inside the shed, still smiling. Time's short, Barry. There's still a lot for us to do. Barry stared at him, confused.
What do you mean? You can get to the lab now.
Well, there's been a slight change of plans. See, it turns out that I need to find something else, and I have an idea of where it might be. But there are some dangers involved, and once you've done such a good job so far, I want you to come along. Wesker's smile transformed into a shark-like grin, a cold, pitiless reminder of what was at stake. In fact, I'm afraid I'm going to have to insist on it. After a long, terrible moment, Barry nodded helplessly. Yay! And that's where I wanted to stop. We're on chapter 13. Yay! Alright, let's see. Jill stomp on the zombies. I'm helping them. Yeah. Oh, that reminds you. I was saying I'm helping them, and I was playing that. I forgot what game I was playing. I played something, and I was like, I'm helping them. I totally relate. Damn, Richard already did. Chris's indie confirmed. Barry putting on his best LA Noire face. He did. Your Chris impression tells me that he was the captain of the football team in high school. Good. That's exactly the vibe I was trying to give. Wesker playing 4D chess right now. Yeah. Wesker's going hard. He's calculating it 1,000,000 times per minute, trying to make sure that everything goes as smooth as possible. You helped the maid in Dishonored. That's what it was, yeah. I killed the maid. I'm like, I'm helping them. I totally get it. Poor Barry. Yeah. Thinking that his family's at stake. Barry Burton was a family man. Yeah. Well, I think that's all the reading we're going to be doing tonight. That's right. Well, the way you had me on the edge of my seat these 2 hours, you brought the story to life. You're a natural, Sabrina. That's like the craziest compliment ever. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for the hearts, by the way. Thank you. I try really hard. I'm very passionate about reading to you guys. I'm just passionate about reading in general. So it's like, it's cool that like I get to do this. Like I get to do this as a job, you know. I find great joy in entertaining you guys, and I can only do, and there's nothing I can do besides extend my appreciation. Thank you guys for hanging out with me and, you know, being along for the ride of the reading. I've had fun too. It's been great so far. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Did you guys like the voices? I tried really hard. That was like the most effort I've ever put in a reading. Night all. Good night, you too, Vane. Hope you have a wonderful week and an even better weekend. And I'll see you Tuesday, okay? Yeah, Wesker voices peak. Oh, I think so. That's awesome. That was the one I was the most nervous about. This was one of the best streams for me. Amazing. I'm glad you guys like it. Yay. Story time is greatly appreciated. Yes. Good. Okay, well, if you're not in the Discord, I highly recommend you check it out. We do an after show, after stream. We do all kinds of fun stuff. Last night we did a Ben 10 alien tier list. It doesn't get better than that, come on. So,
go ahead and go into the description of this video or on my page and hit that Discord link. I'll see you over there. Tuesday we will be back as usual with more Resident Evil 6 with Puck. And then Wednesday we will honestly probably finish this book. The amount we have left is the same amount we read today. So as long as, you know, my throat is permitting and, you know, I'm not too burnt out on it, we'll probably finish the book. So yeah, it'll be exciting. Shout out to Otter for being an excellent co-host. That's right. They love you. You know you're gonna have to make a return, right? They like you too much. He understands. You see that face? That's someone who stands on business. He ain't playing games. You think he ain't gonna take his co-hosting responsibility seriously? You got him messed up. That's the face of a baller right there. Well, I think that's about it. Thank you again, Tom, for the suggestion on the gloves. I have preserved more of this book than I originally thought I would be able to. So, seriously, thank you for that. And, I think that about wraps it up. So, let me tell my good night. There we go. A little head scratches while I go. I hope you all have a wonderful week and an even better weekend. If I don't see you in Discord tonight, I will see you next week. So, good night, everyone. Bye-bye.